The wind howled like a wounded beast driving snow horizontally across the mountain road. Visibility had dropped to mere feet, transforming the familiar road into a treacherous gauntlet of white. Wesley Grant's weathered hands gripped the steering wheel of his ancient pickup truck, knuckles white with tension, as he squinted through the windshield. The wipers fought a losing battle against the relentless snow. In the rearview mirror, he caught sight of his daughter, Maisie. 8 years old and small for her age, her dark eyes, so like her mother's, watched the storm with a calm that belied her years. No child should be that composed in the face of danger. But Maisie had seen worse. "Dad, the snow's getting really bad." Her voice was steady, matter-of-fact. Wesley nodded, eyes never leaving the road. "We'll be all right, Maze. This old truck's seen worse." Like the night Mom died, the question hung in the air between them, innocent yet devastating. Wesley's throat tightened. 5 years had passed since black ice had claimed Sarah, yet the wound remained raw, especially in weather like this. "Yeah," he managed finally, "like that night." The radio crackled with static before a warning cut through. Severe blizzard conditions expected to worsen. All residents advised to seek immediate shelter. Repeat, do not attempt travel. Wesley's jaw clenched. Too late for that warning. The mountain shortcut had seemed smart 30 minutes ago, a chance to get home and help Maisie with her science project before bedtime. Now it looked like a potentially fatal miscalculation. Something flashed in the swirling whiteness ahead, red taillights spinning wildly before disappearing off the edge of the road. Wesley slammed on the brakes, the truck fishtailing before grinding to a halt. "Jesus Christ," he muttered. Peering through the snow, a luxury vehicle had careened off the road, now teetering precariously on the embankment below. In that moment, time slowed. Wesley faced a choice that would change everything: drive on and ensure his daughter's safety, or risk both their lives to save a stranger. There are decisions that reveal who we truly are, choices made in seconds that echo through lifetimes. "Maisie, I need you to stay in the truck." He was already reaching for the emergency kit he kept under the seat, a habit from his rescue worker days. "Someone's had an accident. Are you going to help them like you used to?" Maisie's eyes widened, suddenly alert. Wesley nodded, already pulling on his gloves. "Lock the doors behind me. If I'm not back in 15 minutes, there's an emergency radio in the glove compartment. Channel 9. The bitter cold hit him like a physical blow as he stepped out. Snow immediately clung to his beard and eyelashes, the wind nearly knocking him off his feet. He fought his way down the embankment, boots sliding in the fresh powder, toward the wrecked vehicle. A Jaguar he now saw, its sleek lines incongruous against the brutal landscape. Through the shattered driver's window, Wesley could see a woman slumped over the steering wheel, a thin trickle of blood running down her temple. His training took over: vehicle unstable, driver unconscious, storm intensifying. Time was the enemy now. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" he called, reaching through the window to check her pulse. Strong but rapid. The woman stirred at his touch, her eyes fluttering open, the gray of storm clouds, sharp with intelligence despite the shock. For a moment, disorientation clouded her features before they hardened into suspicion. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice remarkably steady despite the circumstances. "Name's Wesley Grant. Your car's about to slide further down if we don't get you out. Can you move?" She tried to shift away from his touch, but winced as pain shot through her shoulder. "I'm fine," she insisted, though her pallor suggested otherwise. "I just need to call my assistant." Wesley shook his head. "No service up here during storms. We need to move now." Without waiting for permission, he wrenched at the door. Metal screamed in protest, but gave way enough for him to reach in and unbuckle her seatbelt. "I'm going to pull you out. It might hurt, but it's better than freezing to death." With gritted teeth, she nodded once. Wesley carefully extracted her from the damaged vehicle, supporting her weight as her feet touched the snow. The moment she was cleared, a sickening groan of metal preceded the Jaguar sliding another few feet down the embankment. The full implications of what might have happened hit her at once. For a brief moment, the mask of composure slipped, and Wesley glimpsed raw fear beneath. "My daughter's in the truck," he explained, guiding her up the slope with a firm hand on her elbow. "But we can't stay on the road. Storm's getting worse. There's an old ranger cabin about a quarter-mile that way. It's our best shot." As they struggled through the deepening snow toward his truck, she finally spoke again. "Vivian Black." "What's that?" "My name, Vivian Black." Something about the name tugged at Wesley's memory, but the urgent need to get to shelter pushed the thought aside. The cabin was little more than a glorified shed abandoned by the Forestry Service years ago. Wesley shouldered the door open, revealing a dusty interior with a small wood stove, rickety table, and pair of moth-eaten cots. Maisie followed close behind, clutching her father's emergency kit, while eyeing the stranger with undisguised curiosity. Vivian stood frozen in the doorway, surveying the primitive accommodations with poorly concealed horror. Her designer clothes were already soaked through, her perfect chignon collapsed into wet tendrils. Yet she maintained the rigid posture of someone who refused to acknowledge defeat. "This is quaint," she managed, the word dripping with forced politeness. She ran a finger along the dusty table and visibly recoiled. "Is there perhaps another option nearby, a hotel or restaurant?" The question revealed how completely out of touch she was with their surroundings. Wesley didn't bother to hide his weary sigh as he busied himself with the wood stove. "Nearest town is 30 miles. In this weather, might as well be on the moon." He found aged but dry kindling and began constructing a fire with practiced efficiency. "You're welcome to try your luck back on the road, but I wouldn't recommend it." The statement wasn't delivered unkindly, but the implicit challenge hung in the air between them. Vivian's jaw tightened, but she remained silent, reluctantly closing the door against the howling wind. Maisie approached the stranger, extending a small hand. "I'm Maisie. I'm 8. Did you hurt your head in the crash?" Something in Vivian's expression softened momentarily as she regarded the little girl. "Vivian Black. And yes, I suppose I did, but it's nothing serious." She awkwardly accepted the handshake, clearly unaccustomed to interacting with children. A sudden small cough from Maisie caught her attention, and Vivian's brow furrowed. "Are you cold? You should sit closer to the fire your father is building." Wesley glanced up, surprised by the note of genuine concern in the woman's voice. "Maisie has mild asthma, gets worse in the cold." He pulled a small inhaler from his pocket and handed it to his daughter, who accepted it with the resigned familiarity of routine. Vivian watched the interaction, her expression unreadable, before she silently removed her damp designer scarf and awkwardly offered it to the child. "This is cashmere. It will help keep you warm," she said stiffly, as if unused to acts of generosity. Maisie beamed as she accepted the luxurious fabric, wrapping it around her shoulders like a royal mantle. As night fell completely, the storm's fury increased, snow piling against the cabin's small windows until they were completely obscured. The three unlikely companions sat around the meager fire, the dancing flames casting long shadows across their faces. Vivian had refused Wesley's offer of beef jerky from his emergency kit, claiming she wasn't hungry, though her stomach occasionally betrayed her with audible protests. Her shoulder throbbed dully where she had wrenched it in the crash, but she refused to acknowledge the pain, sitting ramrod straight on the edge of the cot. "You should let me look at that cut," Wesley finally said, breaking the tense silence. "Head wounds can be tricky." Vivian touched her temple gingerly. "I'm fine. I don't need anyone's help." Wesley's eyes, the deep blue of a winter sky, studied her for a long moment before he replied, "Nobody needs to say they don't need help unless they're not really okay." The simple observation struck too close to home, and Vivian turned away, focusing her attention on Maisie instead. "Does your father always pick up strangers in snowstorms?" she asked, attempting to deflect. Maisie, who had been quietly arranging pebbles she'd found in her pocket, looked up with a small smile. "Dad used to be a rescue worker. He saved lots of people before Mom died. Now he fixes cars." The guileless revelation hung in the air, offering a glimpse into their lives that caused Wesley to visibly tense. Rescue worker to mechanic. "That's quite a career change." Vivian observed, her tone carefully neutral, despite her curiosity. There was clearly more to this rough-edged man than she had initially assumed. Wesley stoked the fire, his face half hidden in shadow. "Sometimes the things you are good at become the things you can't bear to do anymore." He didn't elaborate, and something in his expression warned against pressing further. The night deepened, and with it, the storm's intensity grew to frightening proportions. Wind screamed through the cracks in the cabin's aging structure, causing the entire building to shudder and creak ominously. The small battery-powered lantern Wesley had retrieved from his emergency kit cast eerie shadows across the walls as he worked to secure the windows with pieces of broken furniture. Vivian, finally abandoning her pretense of aloofness, helped him wedge a splintered chair leg against a particularly unstable shutter. Their hands brushed briefly in the process, and both withdrew quickly, startled by the unexpected contact. The temperature inside the cabin was dropping rapidly despite the fire, their breath forming small clouds with each exhale. "Is it supposed to get this bad?" Vivian asked, unable to keep the edge of concern from her voice. In her penthouse apartment in the city, storms were merely inconvenient spectacles viewed through triple-pane glass, not life-threatening realities. Wesley's expression was grim as he checked the barricades once more. "Mountain weather is unpredictable. This feels worse than what was forecast." He glanced toward Maisie, who was watching their efforts with solemn eyes, despite his attempts to get her to sleep. "We'll be all right, though. The cabin stood this long. It'll hold a bit longer." As if in direct challenge to his reassurance, a violent gust slammed against the structure, causing the roof to emit a sound like a wounded animal. The lantern flickered once, twice, then died completely, plunging them into darkness, save for the fire's glow. Maisie let out a small, frightened sound, and Wesley was at her side instantly, his arm around her shoulders. "Dad, are you scared?" she whispered. Her small face turned up to his, seeking the truth only a child can demand from a parent. Wesley hesitated, weighing honesty against protection. Finally, he brushed a strand of hair from her forehead and answered, "Yes, sometimes I get scared, but never when you're with me, May. You make me brave." The simple declaration, not meant for Vivian's ears, caused something to shift in her perception of this man, a glimpse behind the stoic facade to something genuine and raw. In the hypnotic dance of flames, Wesley's mind drifted back to another winter night 5 years earlier. He could still hear the screech of metal as their car spun out on black ice, could still feel the sickening weightlessness as they careened off the road. The memories came in jagged fragments. Sarah's scream cut short by impact, the taste of blood in his mouth, the desperate struggle to free her from the crumpled passenger side, the absolute certainty as a trained first responder that the woman he loved was slipping away in his arms. He had done everything right, stabilized her neck, applied pressure to wounds, kept her talking, and none of it had mattered. Sarah had died with her head on his lap, their daughter mercifully unconscious in the back seat. Hours later, when Wesley finally succumbed to exhaustion, and Vivian took her turn keeping watch, the roles reversed. Now it was Wesley who observed through the veil of pretended sleep as Vivian paced the small cabin, restless energy radiating from her. Despite her obvious fatigue, the storm continued unabated outside, and the temperature had dropped further, forcing her to accept Wesley's spare flannel shirt over her silk blouse. Vivian huddled closer to the dying embers, her mind slipping backwards through time, as the wind's howl transformed into the echo of shouting voices from her childhood. Her father, Richard Black, had been a titan of industry, a self-made man who valued strength above all else and viewed compassion as weakness. On the Christmas Eve, when her mother was rushed to the hospital with a brain aneurysm, 12-year-old Vivian had begged him to cancel his business trip. "The hospital is full of doctors," he had said dismissively. "What difference would my sitting there make? Life doesn't stop for sentimentality, Vivian." He had boarded his private jet to close a merger in Tokyo, leaving his daughter alone in a hospital waiting room. When the doctors delivered the news that her mother was gone, there had been no one to hold Vivian, no one to share her grief. "He didn't even come to the funeral," Vivian murmured aloud, unaware she was speaking. Said public displays of grief were unseemly. She hugged herself tightly, rocking slightly. "I built my company just to prove I could be better than him. And somewhere along the way, I became him instead." From his cot, Wesley's voice came quietly through the darkness. "Becoming your father isn't inevitable. It's a choice you make every day." Vivian startled, embarrassed to be caught in such vulnerability. "I thought you were asleep." "Hard to sleep when the world's trying to blow apart around us." Wesley sat up slowly, careful not to disturb Maisie. "For what it's worth, you gave my daughter your scarf earlier. That's not something your father would have done from the sound of it." The simple observation hung between them, an unexpected lifeline in the storm of her thoughts. Vivian didn't respond, but something in her rigid posture eased slightly as she added another piece of wood to the fire. Dawn approached, though it was impossible to tell through the blanketed windows. The storm had not diminished, but had settled into a steady, ominous rhythm that suggested it had no intention of passing quickly. Wesley and Vivian sat across from each other, the sleeping form of Maisie between them, as they shared the last of Wesley's emergency rations. "So you run a company," Wesley said, breaking a prolonged silence. "What kind?" Vivian hesitated, unused to condensing Black innovations into casual conversation. Technology primarily. We develop integrated systems for renewable energy applications. She paused, then added with a hint of pride, we just released a microgrid solution that can power rural hospitals for 72 hours during outages. Wesley nodded, genuine interest flickering across his features. Useful stuff. Real-world applications, not just fancy tech for people with too much money. That's the goal, Vivian admitted, though our shareholders would prefer more profitable ventures sometimes. She studied him curiously. What about you? Maisie mentioned you fix cars now. Mechanic at Rollins Garage in Cedar Creek. Nothing fancy, but it pays the bills. He offered no elaboration on his former career, the transition from saving lives to fixing engines. Vivian gathered her courage to ask the question that had been forming since their first encounter. Why did you stop the rescue work? I mean, you obviously were good at it. The moment the words left her mouth, she regretted them, recognizing too late the connection to his wife's death. Wesley was quiet for so long that she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and controlled, but she could hear the undercurrent of pain. After Sarah died, Maisie's mom, I couldn't reconcile it. Spent years training to save strangers, and when it mattered most, I couldn't save her. He ran a hand over his beard, a gesture Vivian had come to recognize as self-comfort. Every emergency call after that, all I could see was Sarah's face. Some things break in ways that don't mend right. The raw honesty of his answer stirred something long dormant in Vivian. Without her corporate shield, without her assistant filtering her responses, she found herself speaking with unexpected candor. I understand that more than you might think. She met his eyes across the fire. After my mother died, I built walls, made sure no one could ever hurt me that way again. And has it worked? Wesley asked, his gaze steady. You can run an empire, control everything and everyone around you. But does it make you feel safe? The question landed with the precision of a surgeon's knife, exposing what lay beneath her carefully constructed defenses. Vivian opened her mouth to deliver her standard confident response, then closed it again. For the first time, she looked at Wesley, not as someone beneath her social standing, but as an equal, perhaps even someone who saw more clearly than she did. No, she finally admitted, the single syllable containing volumes of unspoken loneliness. It doesn't. The confession hung in the air between them, a momentary bridge across their different worlds. Before Wesley could respond, a deafening crack split the air above them. Instinct took over as Wesley lunged across the space, throwing his body over Maisie's sleeping form just as the cabin's roof gave way under the weight of accumulated snow and ice. Timber and slush crashed down the structure, imploding around them in a cacophony of splintering wood and howling wind. Vivian's scream was lost in the chaos as a support beam missed her by inches. And then they were all falling, tumbling through the collapsing floor into a snowdrift that had formed beneath the elevated cabin. The world became a disorienting blur of white and brown cold, invading every sense as they were half buried in the snow. Wesley emerged first, frantically digging, until he uncovered Maisie, who was awake now, and wide-eyed with terror, but mercifully unhurt. Dad, she cried, clinging to him with small, desperate hands. Dad, are you okay? I'm fine, sweetheart, he assured her, though blood trickled from a cut above his eye where debris had struck him. His eyes scanned the wreckage, searching for their third companion. Vivian, he called, his voice nearly lost in the still raging storm. A faint moan answered him from beneath a section of collapsed wall. With Maisie tucked against his side, Wesley dug through the snow and wreckage until he uncovered Vivian, who lay pale and stunned, her left leg bent at an angle that immediately told Wesley it was broken. Can you move? He asked, already knowing the answer. Vivian tried to sit up, only to fall back with a cry of pain that she quickly stifled. Go, she gasped through gritted teeth. Take Maisie and go for help. I'll slow you down. Wesley shook his head, his expression hardening into determination. I'm not leaving you behind. He scanned their surroundings, assessing options with the practiced eye of someone trained for emergencies. The cabin was a total loss, the storm still raging, and they were now exposed to the elements with minimal supplies salvaged from the wreckage. Don't be stupid, Vivian snapped, though her voice wavered with pain. You need to save your daughter. Wesley crouched beside her, his eyes fierce. I'm not leaving anyone behind, not again. The words contained such raw anguish that even Vivian fell silent. With careful movements, he fashioned a makeshift splint for her leg using broken boards and strips torn from his own shirt. Then, despite her protests, he lifted Vivian onto his shoulders in a fireman's carry. Maisie, I need you to hold onto my belt and stay right behind me. Don't let go no matter what. Can you do that for me? Maisie nodded solemnly, her small face set with a determination that mirrored her father's. I can do it, Dad. This is insane, Vivian hissed as Wesley secured his grip under her knees, her injured legs stabilized as best he could manage. You can't carry me through a blizzard. Watch me, Wesley replied grimly, and began trudging through the knee-deep snow toward what he hoped was the direction of the road. Time lost meaning as they struggled through the white wasteland. The wind cut through their inadequate clothing like knives, and snow continued to fall so heavily that visibility was reduced to mere feet. Wesley moved with dogged persistence, each step a battle against exhaustion and the weight of Vivian on his shoulders. Behind him, Maisie trudged faithfully, her small hand maintaining its death grip on his belt, even as her face grew pale with cold. We need to stop, Vivian finally said, her voice weak against his ear. You can't keep this up. Wesley didn't respond, saving his breath for the effort of movement, but the truth of her words was becoming painfully evident. His muscles screamed in protest, and a dangerous lightheadedness was beginning to affect his vision. When Maisie stumbled for the third time in as many minutes, he reluctantly acknowledged they needed shelter, however temporary. A rock formation loomed ahead, offering minimal protection from the wind. Wesley carefully lowered Vivian into the meager shelter of an overhang, then immediately turned to check on Maisie. His daughter's lips had taken on a bluish tinge, and her small body shivered uncontrollably. Come here, Maze, he murmured, gathering her against his chest to share what little body heat he had left. To his surprise, Vivian struggled out of her designer coat, the last vestige of her corporate persona, and wordlessly held it out toward Maisie. Here, she said simply, it's waterproof and has a thermal lining. Wesley hesitated. You need it. She needs it more. Vivian's tone brooked no argument. I grew up in Minnesota. I can handle cold better than an 8-year-old. The statement was a blatant lie. Her violent shivering already betrayed how badly she needed the coat, but the determination in her eyes was absolute. Through a momentary break in the swirling snow, Wesley glimpsed something that might have been lights in the distance. Hope flared briefly in his chest, quickly tempered by realism. Even under ideal conditions, carrying Vivian while guiding Maisie would make the journey challenging. In current conditions, it bordered on impossible. But as Maisie's breathing grew more labored, he knew they had run out of options. I saw lights, he told Vivian, his voice low, so Maisie wouldn't overhear. Not far, but it might as well be the moon in this storm. He hesitated, weighing their diminishing options. I could make it there faster alone. Get help, bring them back for you both. Vivian's eyes widened with alarm. You can't leave Maisie here. She needs you. She needs medical attention more, Wesley countered, though the idea of leaving his daughter even temporarily carved a hollow space in his chest. I can put her between us in this rock shelter. Use your coat and mine to keep her warm. Leave her with me, Vivian said quietly. I'll keep her warm, I promise. The gravity of the promise hung between them. Vivian Black, who had built her life around never depending on others, was asking him to trust her with the most precious thing in his world. Wesley searched her eyes and found beneath the pain and exhaustion a steely resolve he recognized from his own reflection. As he prepared to leave, Vivian caught his wrist with surprising strength. Wesley, she said, using his first name for the first time. Be careful. He nodded once, then turned away before his resolve could falter. The snow swallowed him within seconds, leaving Vivian and Maisie alone in their precarious shelter. Vivian wrapped her arms more tightly around the child, ignoring the searing pain in her broken leg, as she shifted to provide maximum protection from the wind. Your dad is very brave, she said, trying to distract them both from the fear threatening to overwhelm them. He's the bravest, Maisie agreed, snuggling closer. He saved you, and now he's saving us again. Wesley fought through the blizzard with grim determination, each step a battle against the increasing numbness in his extremities. Halfway to his destination, Wesley stumbled and fell to his knees in the deep snow. The cold embraced him with seductive comfort, whispering that rest would be so easy, so peaceful. His hand fumbled to his pocket where his wallet contained the last photo taken of Sarah holding Maisie as a toddler. The sight of their faces, one lost and one waiting for him, gave him the strength to push back to his feet. The first light of dawn revealed a transformed landscape eerily beautiful in its pristine whiteness. Three state patrol snowmobiles crested a ridge followed by an emergency medical team. Leading them was Wesley, barely recognizable beneath layers of borrowed thermal gear, his face haggard with exhaustion, but eyes burning with fierce determination. They found Vivian and Maisie exactly where he had left them, huddled together in their increasingly inadequate shelter. Throughout the endless night, Vivian had kept her promise, using her body to shield Maisie from the worst of the cold, despite her own injury, telling stories of imaginary business adventures to keep the child awake and distracted from the dangerous drowsiness of hypothermia. "Told you I'd come back," Wesley said hoarsely as the medical team worked to stabilize them. Maisie managed a weak smile, reaching for her father's hand with fingers mottled blue and white from cold. "Ms. Vivian told me stories all night," she whispered. "She didn't let me sleep even when I really wanted to." 3 weeks later, the garage was unusually quiet for a Tuesday afternoon. Wesley worked methodically beneath the hood of Mrs. Harkin's ancient Buick, the familiar routine of diagnosing engine problems, a welcome return to normalcy after hospital stays and follow-up appointments. The distinctive sound of an expensive engine purred into the garage bay, interrupting his concentration. Wesley straightened, wiping his hands on a shop rag as he turned to face the customer, only to freeze in surprise. A sleek silver Audi had pulled in, and Vivian Black emerged, though a very different version than the immaculate CEO he had first encountered. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, rather than the severe chignon she had worn before. She was dressed in jeans and a casual sweater, with only the elegant camel coat and the quality of her leather boots hinting at her wealth. She walked with a slight limp, leaning on a carbon fiber cane. In her free hand, she carried a gift bag decorated with cartoon dinosaurs. Their eyes met across the garage, and for a moment neither spoke. The shared trauma of their ordeal had created a connection that transcended usual social pleasantries. "You're walking," Wesley finally said, setting down his tools. Vivian nodded, a small smile playing at the corner of her mouth. "Titanium pins in the tibia. Doctor says I should be rid of the cane in another month." She hesitated, then added, "I brought something for Maisie, if that's all right. She'll be thrilled to see you. Hasn't stopped talking about Miss Vivian's amazing stories since we got home." Vivian glanced at her watch. "Would it be all right if I waited for Maisie's bus?" "Coffee's terrible, but you're welcome to it," Wesley offered with a hint of a smile. "Fair warning, though, once Maisie sees you, you might be roped into dinner. She's been asking when we could invite you." Vivian's eyes widened slightly in surprise. "You've discussed inviting me over." Wesley shrugged, a hint of color rising beneath his beard. "Seems like the least we could do for someone who saved my daughter's life. Unless corporate CEOs have more pressing engagements than spaghetti with a mechanic and an 8-year-old. "I think I could clear my schedule," Vivian replied, the formality of her words belied by the warmth in her voice. The sound of a school bus rumbling to a stop outside broke the moment. Seconds later, Maisie burst through the garage doors, her backpack bouncing against her small shoulders as she ran. She skidded to a halt when she spotted Vivian, her face lighting up with astonished joy. "Miss Vivian," she cried, launching herself forward without hesitation. "You came to visit us." Vivian found herself enveloped in an enthusiastic hug that would have scandalized her corporate colleagues. After a moment of surprise, she returned the embrace, her normally guarded expression softening into genuine affection. "I brought you something," she said, gesturing to the dinosaur-covered bag. Maisie opened the gift with the unbridled excitement only children can muster, squealing with delight at the discovery of a professional-grade art set complete with watercolor pencils and a leather-bound drawing journal. "Dad, look. It's just like the ones real artists use." "What do you say, Mai?" Wesley prompted, though his own expression had softened watching the interaction. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." Maisie hugged Vivian again, then turned to her father with the particular expression he recognized as the prelude to a grand request. "Dad, can Miss Vivian come for dinner? Please, I want to show her my room and my science project." "And Turtle?" "Turtle," Vivian raised an eyebrow in query. "Her stuffed turtle," Wesley explained with a slight smile. "Currently serving as her science project assistant." To Maisie, he added, "I already invited Miss Black for dinner if she wants to come." "I'd love to," Vivian said, surprising herself with how much she meant it. The prospect of a simple family dinner suddenly seemed infinitely more appealing than the exclusive restaurant reservations and business meetings that usually filled her evenings. Actually, she said, her heart racing slightly as she prepared to take a risk unlike any business gamble. I came here with something more than just a gift for Maisie. Wesley looked at her questioningly, his hands absently wiping a non-existent grease spot from his fingers. I've been doing a lot of thinking these past weeks, Vivian continued, about what you said in the cabin about choices and not becoming my father. She took a deep breath. I've decided to launch a new project at Black Innovations, a line of emergency power systems for remote areas, starting with mountain communities like the one where we were stranded. Wesley nodded slowly. Sounds like a good cause. It is, but here's the thing. Vivian's fingers tightened around her cane. I need someone who understands both the technical requirements and the real-world application. Someone with experience in crisis situations who can identify what people actually need, not what tech executives in glass towers think they need. Understanding dawned in Wesley's eyes. You're offering me a job, a consulting position to start, 30 days to see if it's a good fit for both of us. Vivian maintained her business-like tone, though her pulse quickened. The board meeting is in a month, and I need to present a working prototype. I'm offering you a chance to help design systems that could save lives in situations exactly like the one we survived. Wesley's expression grew guarded. I'm just a mechanic, Ms. Black. I don't have the credentials your board would expect. Credentials? Vivian's laugh held a sharp edge. You carried me through a blizzard on your shoulders while guiding an 8-year-old child to safety. I'd say your qualifications are rather exceptional. She softened her tone. Besides, I don't want another engineer with a fancy degree. I want someone who knows what happens when systems fail and people's lives hang in the balance. Wesley ran a hand over his beard, a habit Vivian now recognized as his way of processing difficult decisions. And after the 30 days, if it works out, a permanent position, fair salary, flexible hours so you can still be there for Maisie. Vivian held his gaze. And if it doesn't, you walk away, no hard feelings, with a month's pay in your pocket. Maisie, who had been following the conversation with wide eyes, tugged at her father's sleeve. Dad, it sounds amazing. You could help people again like you used to. The simple observation hit home. Wesley's jaw tightened as he looked at his daughter, then back at Vivian. When would you need an answer? Now would be ideal, Vivian admitted with a small smile. But I can give you until dinner tonight. I assume spaghetti pairs well with job offers. The corner of Wesley's mouth twitched upward. I'll think about it. Vivian nodded, fighting disappointment. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. That's fair. As the three of them walked toward the exit, Wesley paused, his expression suddenly troubled. Wait, Black. Vivian Black, as in Black Innovations, as in Richard Black's daughter. Vivian froze, surprised it had taken this long for the connection to register. Yes, you've heard of my father. Wesley's face hardened. You could say that. Your father's company bought out Horizon Energy 5 years ago. Right after the merger, they slashed the employee assistance program. The program that was paying for my wife's medical treatments after the accident. The words struck Vivian like a physical blow. I didn't know. Why would you? Wesley's voice had gone flat. Just business, cut costs, maximize profit. That's the Black way. Maisie looked between them, sensing the sudden tension, but not understanding its source. Dad, what's wrong? Wesley softened his expression for his daughter's benefit. Nothing, Maze, just grown-up talk. He turned back to Vivian, his eyes now cold. I think we'll have to take a rain check on dinner, Ms. Black, and on the job offer. Vivian stood motionless, watching as Wesley guided Maisie toward his truck, the girl looking back in confusion over her shoulder. The connection they'd formed in the storm, the bridge across their different worlds, had just collapsed beneath the weight of a past neither had fully recognized until now. As Wesley's truck pulled away, Vivian leaned heavily on her cane, feeling the weight of her father's legacy bearing down on her shoulders more heavily than ever before. The irony was bitter. In trying to escape becoming Richard Black, she had unknowingly contributed to the very kind of suffering her father had dismissed as irrelevant to the bottom line. She had come here today hoping to build something new, a product line, yes, but also perhaps something more personal. Instead, she had discovered yet another wall between herself and authentic connection, one built from corporate decisions she had endorsed without considering their human cost. Vivian Black drove away from Rollins' garage with the taste of ashes in her mouth and a new understanding of what it truly meant to carry her family name. The revelation haunted her through the night and into the next morning's executive meeting. As her team presented the quarterly projections on the conference room's massive screens, Vivian found herself staring at the numbers with new eyes. Behind every percentage point of increased efficiency lay stories like Wesley's real people, whose lives were altered by decisions made in rooms exactly like this one. Thomas, her assistant, leaned close to whisper, "Ms. Black, they're waiting for your input on the cost-cutting proposals." Vivian blinked, focusing on the slide currently displayed, employee benefit reduction options. "I'm sorry," she said, rising suddenly to her feet. "We need to take a short break. 20 minutes, everyone." Without waiting for a response, she strode from the room, ignoring the puzzled glances of her executive team. In her private office, Vivian pulled up the company archives, searching for records of the Horizon Energy acquisition. It took less than 15 minutes to confirm Wesley's story and to discover something even more disturbing. The decision to cut the employee assistance program had been her initiative, not her father's. A young executive eager to prove herself, she had identified the program as redundant and cost-inefficient without ever considering the human beings who depended on it. Vivian's hands trembled as she closed the file. The woman who had made that decision 5 years ago seemed like a stranger, now cold, calculating, focused entirely on the numbers, without a thought for the lives behind them. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Thomas entered, his expression concerned. "The team is reassembling. Should I tell them you'll be a few more minutes?" Vivian straightened her shoulders. "No. Have research and development meet me in my office in 1 hour and cancel my afternoon appointments. All of them." Thomas's eyebrows rose slightly, but he nodded. "Yes, Ms. Black." "And Thomas, find everything we have on emergency power systems for remote areas. I want every report, every abandoned project, every scrap of research we've ever done on the topic." "May I ask why?" Vivian's expression hardened with determination. "Because we're launching a new initiative, and we're going to do it right this time." 2 days later, Wesley was elbow deep in the transmission of a Ford F-150 when Mr. Rollins appeared at his shoulder. "Grant, there's someone here to see you, says it's important." Wesley sighed, sliding out from under the vehicle. "Tell them I'm busy. I'm already behind schedule." "I think you'll want to see this one," Rollins insisted, his usually gruff voice tinged with something like awe. She brought an entire team with her. They were waiting in the break room. Wesley's stomach tightened with apprehension. Wiping his hands on a shop rag, he made his way to the small, dingy room that served as both break area and makeshift office. As the door swung open, he stopped short. Vivian Black stood at the center of a semicircle of people in business attire, her own appearance once again. The immaculate CEO rather than the casual visitor of days before. A digital projector had been set up on the wobbly break room table, casting a presentation onto the wall where a faded calendar normally hung. "Mr. Grant," Vivian said formally, though her eyes held a mix of determination and uncertainty, "thank you for seeing us." Wesley folded his arms across his chest, conscious of the grease stains on his coveralls. "Didn't realize I had a choice." "You always have a choice," Vivian replied, the words carrying weight beyond their immediate context. "I hope you will choose to hear me out." When Wesley remained silent, she took it as permission to continue. "I came to apologize, not just for what happened with your wife's medical care, but for my part in it." She gestured to the presentation behind her. 5 years ago, I made the decision to cut the employee assistance program at Horizon Energy. It was one of my first major initiatives after joining the board. I did it without understanding or caring about the impact it would have on real people. People like your family. The admission hung in the air between them. Wesley's jaw worked as he processed her words. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I want you to know exactly who you'd be working with if you reconsider my offer." Vivian met his gaze unflinchingly. "I was becoming my father, just as you said, making decisions based purely on profit without regard for human cost. I don't want to be that person anymore." She turned to one of her team members who handed her a folder. "This is our new proposal for the Emergency Power Systems Initiative. We've restructured it completely based on what I learned from our experience in the storm." Vivian held out the folder. The technical specifications are all there. But what's missing is the human element, the real-world expertise that only someone with your background could provide. Wesley made no move to take the folder. And why should I help the company that cut my wife's medical support? You shouldn't, Vivian acknowledged, surprising him. Which is why the first phase of this project includes the reinstatement of the full employee assistance program at all our subsidiaries, retroactive to include any former employees who were affected by the cuts. She set the folder on the table between them. It won't bring Sarah back. Nothing can do that. But it might help someone else avoid the same loss. The room fell silent, save for the soft hum of the projector. Wesley stared at the folder, his expression unreadable. 30 days, he finally said. That was your offer. Vivian nodded. 30 days to see if we can build something worthwhile together. I'll need flexible hours. Maisie comes first. Of course. Wesley reached for the folder, his calloused fingers leaving faint smudges on the glossy surface. I'm not promising anything beyond the 30 days, and I won't be just a token consultant for your board meeting. If I see something wrong, I'll say so. That's exactly what I'm counting on, Vivian replied, relief evident in her voice. We have a month to create a working prototype before the board meeting. After that, we'll see. As the technical team began explaining the current specifications to Wesley, Vivian stepped back, watching as the mechanic immediately began asking pointed practical questions that her engineers struggled to answer. Already she could see the gap between their theoretical knowledge and his hard-earned wisdom. This was either the most brilliant decision of her career or the most foolhardy. Either way, the next 30 days promised to be unlike anything Black Innovations had ever experienced. The Black Innovations headquarters rose like a monolith of glass and steel from the San Francisco waterfront, its sleek surfaces reflecting the morning light. Inside the lobby, biometric scanners brushed metal fixtures and holographic displays proclaimed the company's commitment to cutting-edge technology. Wesley Grant stood just inside the entrance, his weathered work boots a stark contrast to the polished marble floor. He tugged uncomfortably at the collar of his new button-down shirt, the only concession he'd made to the corporate environment. His worn leather jacket and jeans remained stubbornly in place, a silent refusal to be something he wasn't. Beside him, Vivian checked her watch, a discreet timepiece worth more than Wesley's truck. The R&D team should be assembled by now. Are you ready? Wesley's expression tightened. As I'll ever be. The elevator whisked them upward, its glass walls offering an expanding view of the bay. Wesley kept his eyes fixed on the changing floor numbers, his knuckles white around the handle of the battered toolbox he'd insisted on bringing. You didn't need to bring your own tools, Vivian remarked, watching his discomfort with a mixture of concern and curiosity. We have a fully equipped lab. I think with these, Wesley replied, simply raising the toolbox slightly. Always have. The elevator doors opened onto the 37th floor, revealing a vast open workspace humming with activity. Engineers clustered around workstations, 3D printers, Word and glass-walled fabrication rooms, and holographic models hovered above specialized projection tables. As Vivian led Wesley through the space, conversations faltered and heads turned. He felt the weight of curious and skeptical glances. A mechanic from a small-town garage had no business being here, their expressions seemed to say. Thomas appeared, tablet in hand, his perfectly tailored suit and meticulously styled hair, embodying corporate efficiency. Ms. Black, the team is waiting in conference room A. Dr. Harrison has some concerns about the adjusted timeline. I'm sure he does, Vivian replied dryly. Thomas, this is Wesley Grant, our new technical consultant for the Emergency Response Systems project. Thomas's eyes flickered briefly over Wesley's attire before he extended a hand. A pleasure, Mr. Grant. I've arranged temporary credentials and workspace access. The conference room fell silent as Vivian entered with Wesley in tow. Around an oval table sat 6 people each, with a sleek laptop and an expression ranging from curious to openly dubious. Good morning, everyone. Vivian began, taking her place at the head of the table. This is Wesley Grant, who'll be joining the ERS project as our field operations consultant. A man with silver-streaked hair and wire-rimmed glasses looked up sharply. Field operations, I wasn't aware we had created such a position. We hadn't, Dr. Harrison, Vivian acknowledged, but recent events have highlighted a gap in our approach. Mr. Grant brings practical emergency response experience that will be invaluable to ensuring our systems function in real-world crisis situations. Dr. Harrison's lips pressed into a thin line. With all due respect, Ms. Black, we're already under enormous pressure to meet the board deadline. Adding untested variables at this stage seems inadvisable. On the contrary, Vivian countered smoothly, Mr. Grant's insights are precisely what we need to ensure we don't present the board with another theoretically brilliant but practically useless prototype. The words hung in the air, a reference to past failures no one seemed eager to acknowledge. Vivian gestured to a young woman with bright eyes and a streak of purple in her dark hair. Zoe, would you bring Mr. Grant up to speed on our current design challenges? Zoe nodded enthusiastically, tapping at her tablet. A holographic model materialized above the center of the table, a compact unit roughly the size of a small refrigerator. This is the ERS-5 prototype, she explained. Modular emergency power system designed for rapid deployment in disaster zones. Solar panels, wind turbine capability, and battery storage with satellite uplink for remote monitoring. Wesley circled the table slowly, studying the projection from all angles. What's the deployment weight? 280 pounds. Zoe replied. Too heavy, Wesley said immediately. If roads are compromised, it'll never reach remote areas. Dr. Harrison sighed audibly. We're well aware of the weight issue, Mr. Grant, but the battery capacity requirements don't matter if it never reaches the people who need it, Wesley interrupted. He set his toolbox on the table with a soft thud and opened it, extracting a small black device. This is a standard emergency radio, the kind carried by most rescue workers. Battery lasts maybe 8 hours in the cold. He placed it beside a much larger satellite phone from his kit. This might get a signal in remote areas, but its battery dies twice as fast. In a real emergency, power management becomes critical within the first hour. Wesley looked around the table, making eye contact with each team member. When I carried Vivian Ms. Black through that blizzard, I wasn't thinking about battery efficiency curves or optimal solar collection. I was thinking about keeping a little girl from freezing to death and a woman's broken leg from killing her through shock or infection. The room had gone very quiet. Even Dr. Harrison was watching Wesley with new attention. Your system needs to be light enough for one person to move it, simple enough to operate while wearing gloves with numb fingers, and tough enough to survive being drop-kicked or partially buried in debris. Zoe was typing rapidly, capturing his observations. What about the interface? We've designed a touch screen with physical buttons, Wesley interrupted. Big ones. When your hands are shaking from cold or adrenaline and you're wearing gloves, touch screens are useless. For the next 2 hours, Wesley dismantled their assumptions one by one, drawing on experiences from his rescue worker days and the recent blizzard ordeal. What began as reluctant attention gradually transformed into genuine engagement as the team recognized the practical wisdom behind his blunt observations. By lunchtime, even Dr. Harrison was sketching modifications based on Wesley's input. Only Vivian remained largely silent, watching the transformation with quiet satisfaction. As the team dispersed for lunch, she approached Wesley. That went better than expected. Wesley closed his toolbox with a soft click. They're not bad people, just never been cold enough or scared enough to understand what matters when everything goes wrong. And you have, Vivian said softly. It wasn't a question. More than I'd like, he acknowledged. His phone buzzed with a text message, and his expression lightened as he read it. Maisie's science project won first place. She wants to video chat to show me her ribbon. Go, Vivian said immediately. Take as long as you need. We can continue this afternoon. Wesley looked surprised by her easy accommodation. Thanks, I won't be long. As he walked away, phone already at his ear, Vivian felt Thomas's presence at her elbow. An unconventional choice, her assistant observed neutrally. The best ones usually are, Vivian replied. The board might not see it that way, especially the Marcus Whitfield. He's been pushing hard for control of the ERS division. Vivian's expression hardened. Marcus can push all he wants. This is still my company. For now, Thomas reminded her gently. But if this prototype fails to impress at the board meeting, it won't fail, Vivian said with a certainty she didn't entirely feel. Not this time. The days fell into a rhythm. Each morning, Wesley arrived at Black Innovations with his toolbox, a thermos of coffee from home, and an increasingly clear vision of what the emergency system needed to be. Each evening he returned to Cedar Creek in time to help Maisie with homework and tuck her into bed. The prototype evolved rapidly under his guidance. What began as an unwieldy technology showcase transformed into something lean, rugged, and intensely practical. Weight dropped, durability increased, and interfaces simplified. 2 weeks into the process, Wesley arrived to find the team clustered around a physical prototype, the first tangible incarnation of their redesigned system. No larger than a camping cooler, its reinforced shell bore oversized control buttons and clear instructional graphics. "Morning, Wes," Zoe called cheerfully, using the nickname that had gradually replaced the formal Mr. Grant among the younger team members. "Want to do the honors?" Wesley set down his toolbox and coffee, eyeing the prototype with professional scrutiny. "You got it assembled ahead of schedule." "Worked it through the weekend," she admitted. "We're all pretty excited to see if it performs as well as the simulations predict." Dr. Harrison approached his initial skepticism, now tempered with grudging respect. "Mr. Grant, we've incorporated your suggested modifications to the power distribution system. Theoretically, it should provide critical power for up to 72 hours in sub-zero conditions." "Theoretically doesn't count for much in a blizzard," Wesley replied, but there was no bite in the words. He knelt beside the unit, running his hands over the sealed seams and reinforced corners. "Let's see what she can do." The test began promisingly. The system powered up with a reassuring hum, its diagnostic lights flashing in sequence before settling into a steady green glow. Wesley methodically tested each function, his expression growing more approving with each successful operation. "The emergency beacon works perfectly," Zoe reported, checking readings on her tablet. "Signal strength is actually higher than we projected." Wesley nodded, moving to test the auxiliary power outlets. He plugged in a standard medical device, a small oxygen concentrator, and watched as it powered up normally. "How's the power consumption curve?" he asked. Dr. Harrison consulted a monitor. "Well, within parameters. At this rate, we should achieve the full 72-hour... A sharp crack interrupted him, followed by a puff of acrid smoke from one corner of the prototype. Warning lights flashed red across the control panel before the entire unit went dark. Wesley reacted instantly, disconnecting the medical device and popping open the unit's service panel. Inside, a small circuit board smoldered, the smell of burnt electronics filling the air. "Power regulator failure," he diagnosed, carefully extracting the damaged component. "Complete burnout." The mood in the lab deflated visibly. 2 weeks of progress, and they were back to square one. "Could it be a manufacturing defect?" Zoe suggested hopefully. Wesley examined the charred component, his expression thoughtful. "Maybe, but I think it's a design issue. The regulator's underrated for the load capacity." Dr. Harrison frowned, checking his calculations. "That's impossible. I specified components with a 40% safety margin." "Theory and practice," Wesley murmured, more to himself than to the others. He reached for his toolbox, extracting a multimeter. "Mind if I check something?" For the next hour, Wesley methodically traced the power flow through the system, taking measurements and making notes on a scrap of paper. The team watched anxiously, the setback casting a pall over their earlier optimism. Vivian arrived as Wesley was reassembling the prototype, his expression troubled. "I heard we had a problem," she said, looking from the darkened unit to the tense faces around her. "Power regulator failure," Dr. Harrison reported stiffly. "We'll need to redesign the entire distribution system. It will set us back at least a week, possibly 2. 3 days, Wesley countered, closing his toolbox with a decisive click. All eyes turned to him. 3 days, Dr. Harrison repeated incredulously. "That's not nearly enough time to—" "It isn't if we stop trying to reinvent the wheel," Wesley interrupted. "The problem isn't the regulator itself, it's how we're using it." He turned to Vivian. "I need to go back to Cedar Creek. There's something at the garage I think might solve this." Vivian glanced at her watch. "The company helicopter can have you there in 30 minutes. Wesley's eyebrows rose slightly at the extravagance, but he nodded. "I'll be ready in 5. As the team dispersed to salvage what data they could from the failed test, Vivian found herself alone with Dr. Harrison. "He's unorthodox," the scientist admitted grudgingly, "but I'm beginning to understand why you brought him on board." Vivian smiled slightly. "High praise coming from you. Don't mistake professional respect for endorsement of the entire enterprise," Harrison cautioned. "I still have serious reservations about rushing this to the board meeting. And I'm not the only one. Marcus Whitfield has been asking pointed questions about resource allocation and project viability. Vivian's smile faded. Marcus should focus on his own division and leave R&D to those who understand it. He understands one thing very well, Harrison replied. Opportunity. If this project fails, he'll use it as leverage to push for broader control. Then we won't fail, Vivian said with finality. Will we, Doctor? The helicopter touched down in the small municipal airfield outside Cedar Creek, its rotors stirring dust across the tarmac. Wesley emerged ducking instinctively beneath the slowing blades. The pilot had offered to wait, but Wesley had declined. He needed time to think, and the familiar drive back would provide that. At Rollins' garage, the day's business continued as usual. Mr. Rollins looked up in surprise as Wesley entered, still dressed in his uncharacteristic button-down shirt and better jeans. Grant thought you were playing scientist in the big city this month. Need to borrow some equipment, Wesley explained, already heading for his workbench at the back of the garage. Rollins followed curiosity, overcoming his usual hands-off management style. How's it going up there with all them fancy engineers? Wesley rummaged through a drawer, extracting a battered cardboard box filled with salvaged electronic components. They're good people, smart, just disconnected from how things work when they break. And that's where you come in, Rollins nodded sagely. Always did have a knack for fixing what seemed unfixable. Wesley paused in his search, the older man's words striking an unexpected chord. For years after Sarah's death, he had defined himself by his failure, his inability to save the one person who mattered most. Yet here was a simple truth: he was a fixer, always had been. Whether as a rescue worker or a mechanic, his purpose had remained constant. Found it, he murmured, lifting a small device from the box. It was a power regulator from a hybrid vehicle modified and repurposed. That from the Ellis job last year. Rollins squinted at the component. The one where the factory part was back-ordered for 6 weeks and you rigged something up to get her back on the road. Wesley nodded carefully, placing the component in a small plastic container. Handled a fluctuating load from a damaged alternator for 8,000 miles before they could afford the proper repair. Should be perfect for what we need now. As he prepared to leave, Wesley hesitated, then asked the question that had been nagging at him. You heard anything from Vivian Black since she came by the garage that day? Rollins's bushy eyebrows rose. The CEO lady, nope. Figured whatever business you two had was just that, your business. Wesley nodded, relieved. The last thing he needed was town gossip about his connection to Black Innovations. His position was temporary, his life here permanent. Best to keep the world separate. Bus is late again, Rollins remarked, glancing at the wall clock. Maisie'll be wondering where you are. Wesley checked his phone, finding a missed text from Mrs. Harkins, their elderly neighbor who watched Maisie after school. A flash of guilt hit him. His daughter had grown used to his predictable schedule at the garage. This new arrangement, even with its flexible hours, still meant changes to their routine. I'll pick her up on my way back, he decided. Can you let Mrs. Harkins know? The school playground was nearly empty when Wesley arrived, most children having departed with the bus or earlier parent pickups. Maisie sat alone on a swing, her small legs pumping half-heartedly as she dragged the toe of one sneaker through the dirt. She looked up as his truck approached, her expression brightening immediately. What the down? Wesley felt the familiar twist in his heart, that mixture of love and lingering grief that came whenever he saw Sarah's eyes looking back at him from Maisie's face. Hey, Maze, he said as she climbed into the truck. Sorry I'm late. Had to pick something up from the garage. It's okay, she replied, buckling her seatbelt. Amy Perkins said her mom told her you're working for a fancy company now. Is that true? Wesley frowned slightly. Small towns and their gossip networks were predictably efficient. Not exactly. I'm helping them with a project, just for a month. Is it the lady from the snow, Miss Vivian? Yes, Wesley had admitted, pulling away from the curb. Her company makes emergency equipment, and I'm helping them make it better. Maisie considered this, her small face thoughtful. Like the stuff you used to use when you were a rescue person. Something like that. Then you should definitely help them, Maisie declared with the absolute certainty of childhood. You always knew how to fix things when they broke. From the mouths of babes, Wesley thought, echoing Rollins's earlier observation. That's the plan, kiddo, but it's just temporary. Why? The simple question caught him off guard. Because that's not our life, Maze. We live here. My job is at the garage. But you don't like it as much, Maisie said matter-of-factly. You never talk about the cars you fix like you talk about the ladies' project. Wesley glanced at his daughter, surprised by her perception. Had he been that transparent, true, the challenges at Black Innovations had engaged parts of his mind that had lain dormant for years. The satisfaction of solving real problems that could save lives, it was a feeling he'd forgotten. Sometimes, he said carefully, what we like and what we need to do are different things. Because of Mom, Maisie asked quietly. Wesley's hands tightened on the steering wheel. They had never shied away from talking about Sarah, but Maisie's increasingly perceptive questions often caught him unprepared. Partly, he acknowledged, after Mom died, I needed to be here for you. Stable, present. But I'm bigger now, Maisie pointed out. And you said Miss Vivian's company is making things to help people in emergencies. Mom would have thought that was important. The simple truth of it struck Wesley with unexpected force. Sarah, with her passionate belief in service to others, would indeed have pushed him toward work that saved lives, not carburetors. When did you get so smart? He asked, ruffling her hair affectionately. I've always been smart, Maisie informed him seriously. You just don't always listen. Wesley laughed, the sound surprising him with its ease. Fair enough. Now what do you say to pizza for dinner? I need to head back to the city this evening. Maisie's eyes widened. Tonight? But you're always home for bedtime. Just this once, Wesley promised. There's a problem with our project, and I think I know how to fix it. Mrs. Harkins already said she can stay over. Can I come with you? Maisie asked hopefully. I've never been to San Francisco. Not this time, kiddo, but maybe. Wesley hesitated, then continued. Maybe we can visit before the project ends. Would you like that? Maisie's enthusiastic nod was answer enough. Wesley returned to Black Innovations late that evening, the salvage power regulator secure in his pocket. The R&D floor was largely deserted, save for a few dedicated engineers, and to his surprise, Vivian herself. She sat alone in the conference room, surrounded by projection screens displaying various aspects of the project. She looked up as he entered, fatigue evident in the shadows beneath her eyes. You're back sooner than I expected. Found what we needed, Wesley replied, placing the component on the table between them. Hybrid car power regulator modified to handle irregular input from a damaged system. I used it in a repair job last year when the factory part wasn't available. Vivian examined the component with interest. And you think this will solve our power distribution problem? It's designed to do exactly what we need. Manage variable power loads in unstable conditions. Wesley pulled up a chair, sketching a quick diagram on a notepad. See, most power regulators are built for stable environments. This one's different. It's built to compensate for system damage. Like a person adapting to an injury, Vivian observed. Wesley nodded, surprised by the apt analogy. Exactly. Instead of trying to maintain optimal performance across all systems, it prioritizes critical functions, shutting down non-essentials to preserve core capabilities. He pushed the diagram toward her. The ERS doesn't need to be perfect. It needs to be resilient. This approach sacrifices efficiency for survival, just like the human body in crisis. Vivian studied the drawing, her expression thoughtful. It's elegant in its simplicity. Sometimes the best solutions are, Wesley agreed. We've been overthinking it, trying to create a system that works perfectly in extreme conditions. What we need is a system that adapts when perfection becomes impossible. Their eyes met across the table, and Wesley saw something unexpected in Vivian's gaze, not just professional appreciation, but a deeper understanding. Like you did, she said quietly, in the storm. When carrying me and guiding Maisie became impossible, you adapted. You got help. Wesley looked away, uncomfortable with the parallel. Different situation. But the same principle, Vivian insisted, knowing when to change the approach instead of forcing the original plan to work. A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only when Wesley stifled a yawn. You should get some rest, Vivian said. The team can implement your solution in the morning. Wesley nodded, suddenly aware of the day's accumulated fatigue. Maisie asked if she could visit before the project ends. See San Francisco. Of course, Vivian replied immediately. We could arrange a tour of the public areas of the building. I think she'd enjoy the robotics lab on the 12th floor. They're developing companion robots for pediatric hospitals. Wesley studied her curiously. You're good with her. Kids in general seems like. Not what I expected from a CEO. Vivian's expression softened. Children are refreshingly direct. No hidden agendas, no corporate politics. Just honest questions and genuine responses. Unlike your board members, Wesley guessed. A shadow crossed Vivian's face. Some more than others. Marcus Whitfield, in particular, has been unusually interested in this project lately. The guy Thomas mentioned, why would he care about emergency systems? It's not about the technology, Vivian explained. It's about control. Marcus has been positioning himself as my father's true successor within the company. The ERS project is just his latest target. She sighed, rubbing her temples. Richard built this company on profit above all else. Marcus embodies that philosophy. I've been trying to shift our focus toward meaningful innovation even when the profit margins are smaller. And the board meeting is the showdown, Wesley concluded. Your vision against his. In a nutshell. Vivian managed a tired smile. No pressure. Wesley pocketed the power regulator, preparing to leave. Well, for what it's worth, I think your approach is the right one. Technology should serve people, not the other way around. Thank you, Vivian said softly. That means more than you might think. As Wesley headed for the elevator, he found himself reflecting on the unexpected complexity of Vivian Black. The privileged CEO battling corporate politics to build something meaningful. The woman who had shielded his daughter from the cold with her own body. Two sides of the same person, both equally genuine. And somewhere in that reflection lurked an uncomfortable question. Was he also more complex than the identity he had settled for? Could the mechanic of Cedar Creek also be something else, something more aligned with the man he had once been? The next 3 days passed in a blur of focused activity. Wesley's modified power regulator proved to be the breakthrough they needed. Integrated into the redesigned system, it allowed the ERS to adapt to changing conditions, sacrificing non-essential functions to maintain critical power for emergency communications and medical equipment. By the end of the week, they had a working prototype that had survived every stress test the team could devise. Dr. Harrison, initially the most skeptical of Wesley's approach, became its most vocal advocate, as test after test confirmed the system's resilience. It's counterintuitive, he admitted, as they reviewed the final data. We've been trying to build a perfect system when what we needed was an adaptable one. Wesley nodded, watching as Zoe subjected the prototype to yet another simulated environment, this time hurricane-force winds and torrential rain. Perfection is the enemy of survival, he said quietly. I learned that in rescue work. The people who survive aren't the strongest or the smartest. They're the ones who adapt when everything goes wrong. Dr. Harrison regarded him thoughtfully. You know, Mr. Grant, there would be a place for you here permanently if you wanted it. Your perspective has been invaluable. The offer caught Wesley off guard. He had maintained a careful mental distance from Black innovations, reminding himself daily that this was temporary, that his real life waited back in Cedar Creek. Yet somewhere along the way, the work had become more than just a consulting job. It had reconnected him to a purpose he had abandoned after Sarah's death. Before he could formulate a response, an alarm blared from Zoe's testing station. The prototype's case had shifted under the simulated wind pressure, exposing a seam in the waterproof housing. Warning lights flashed across the control panel as moisture detection sensors triggered emergency protocols. Shut it down, Wesley called, moving quickly to the testing chamber. Water intrusion at the main housing seam. Zoe terminated the test, her expression crestfallen. I thought we had solved the sealing issue yesterday. Wesley examined the damaged unit, carefully tracing the failure point with his finger. The sealant held. It's the housing itself. The material flexes too much under pressure. Dr. Harrison joined them, his earlier optimism fading. We're out of time for another material revision. The board presentation is in 3 days. A heavy silence fell over the team. After weeks of progress, to fail on such a fundamental issue seemed particularly cruel. What if we don't fight the flex, Wesley said slowly, an idea forming. Instead of trying to make it rigid, what if we make it work with the movement? He reached for his ever-present toolbox, extracting a roll of heavy-duty waterproof tape used in emergency boat repairs. This stuff stays flexible down to -40 degrees. We could create a secondary seal that moves with the housing instead of trying to keep it completely rigid. A dynamic rather than static approach, Dr. Harrison mused, interest rekindling. It could work, but we'd need to test it extensively. Then we'd better get started, Wesley said grimly. 3 days isn't much time. As the team mobilized around the new approach, Vivian appeared at Wesley's side. A word, please. Her tone carried an urgency that prompted Wesley to follow her immediately to a small side office. There's a problem, she said without preamble, closing the door behind them. Someone's been accessing our project files after hours. Design specifications, test results, even your personal notes. Wesley frowned. Security breach? Internal. Vivian clarified, her expression grim. The access came from within our network using executive credentials. Whitfield, Wesley guessed. Vivian nodded. Almost certainly. But we can't prove it yet. Thomas is working with security to trace the specific access points. What would he gain from stealing our designs? Isn't he already on the board? It's not about stealing the technology, Vivian explained. It's about sabotage. If he can identify weaknesses in our approach before the presentation, he can use them to undermine our entire proposal. Wesley absorbed this, his mind racing through implications. So we're not just racing the clock now, we're racing Whitfield too. Yes, and he fights dirty. Vivian's voice hardened. My father once called him a shark who smells blood 3/4 reports away. If he senses weakness in this project, he'll exploit it ruthlessly. Then we don't give him anything to exploit, Wesley said firmly. We solve the ceiling problem, run every test we can think of, and make sure this system is bulletproof by the board meeting. Vivian studied him with an expression he couldn't quite decipher. You've become quite invested in this project. Wesley shifted uncomfortably. It's important work. Could save lives. Yes, it could. Vivian hesitated, then added, You know, Dr. Harrison mentioned he offered you a permanent position. He mentioned it, Wesley acknowledged cautiously. I haven't given him an answer. And will you consider it, I mean? The question hung between them, loaded with unspoken implications. Wesley thought of Maisie's observation that he spoke differently about this work than he did about fixing cars. He thought of the satisfaction he'd found in solving problems that mattered, in knowing his solutions might save someone from experiencing what he had lost. I don't know, he admitted finally. Cedar Creek is home, has been since Sarah died. Maisie has friends there, a school she knows. San Francisco has excellent schools, Vivian pointed out, and children are remarkably adaptable. More than their parents sometimes. Wesley agreed with a faint smile. But it's not just about logistics, it's about... He struggled to articulate the complex tangle of emotions. After Sarah died, I needed certainty, predictability. The garage gave me that. Vivian nodded slowly. And this the project, the company, San Francisco, it's all uncertain. Exactly. Life is uncertainty, Wesley, she said softly. We just create illusions of control to help us sleep at night. The insight struck him with unexpected force. Wasn't that exactly what he had done? Created a carefully controlled environment where nothing could surprise him, nothing could hurt him again. Before he could respond, Thomas appeared at the door, his usually composed demeanor visibly strained. Ms. Black, I need to speak with you immediately. It's urgent. Vivian excused herself, following Thomas into the hallway. Through the glass walls, Wesley could see their conversation growing increasingly intense, Thomas gesturing emphatically while Vivian's posture grew more rigid with each passing moment. When she returned, her face had drained of color. What is it? Wesley asked, immediately concerned. Marcus didn't just access our files, she said, her voice tight with controlled fury. He's filed a formal complaint with the board alleging that I've misappropriated company resources for a personal project with no viable commercial application. That's ridiculous, Wesley protested. The ERS has clear market potential. It gets worse, Vivian continued. He's specifically questioning your involvement, suggesting that I hired you out of personal obligation after the Blizzard incident rather than professional merit. The implication hung in the air, ugly and insinuating. Wesley felt a surge of anger on Vivian's behalf. That's not just wrong, it's insulting to both of us, he said hotly. My contributions to this project speak for themselves. Unfortunately, perception matters as much as reality in corporate politics, Vivian replied. Marcus has scheduled an emergency committee review tomorrow morning, a day before our full board presentation. What does that mean for the project? It means, Vivian said grimly, that unless we can definitively prove the ERS is commercially viable and that your involvement was based on professional qualifications, not personal connection, the board may vote to terminate the project before we even get to present the prototype. Wesley's mind raced through the implications. What do you need from me? Documentation of your rescue worker background, proof of your qualifications. And she hesitated, possibly your presence at the committee meeting tomorrow. Wesley nodded without hesitation. Whatever it takes. As Vivian turned to leave, Wesley caught her arm gently. Hey, we'll fix this, like we fixed the power regulator and the ceiling problem. A flicker of gratitude crossed her face. I hope you're right, because if Marcus wins this round, it's not just the ERS that's in jeopardy. It's everything I've been trying to build at Black Innovations since my father stepped down. The realization settled over Wesley with sudden clarity. This wasn't just about an emergency power system anymore. It was about Vivian's vision for her company, a vision that valued human needs over profit margins, a vision worth fighting for. He returned to the lab with renewed determination, only to find the team clustered around Zoe's computer expressions, ranging from confusion to dismay. What's happened now? He asked, joining the group. Dr. Harrison looked up, his face grave. Someone's accessed our test results and modified the data. According to these records, the ERS failed critical safety protocols 2 days ago. That's impossible, Wesley protested. I was here for those tests. The system performed perfectly. Not according to the official records, Zoe said, scrolling through the altered data. They show catastrophic failure under standard load conditions. Worse, they're time-stamped and authenticated with Dr. Harrison's credentials. Wesley felt the blood drain from his face as the full implications became clear. Whitfield, he's not just trying to undermine the project, he's actively sabotaging it. Dr. Harrison removed his glasses, pinching the bridge of his nose. Without the original's test data, we have no way to prove these results are falsified. Even with the working prototype, the board won't approve a system with failed safety records. The team fell silent, the weight of defeat settling over them. Weeks of work innovations that could save countless lives, all potentially destroyed by corporate politics. Wesley stared at the prototype, his mind racing. Then slowly a determined expression settled over his features. We have one option left, he said quietly. We run the tests again. All of them, right now. That's impossible, Dr. Harrison protested. The full testing protocol takes 3 days. The committee meeting is tomorrow morning. Then we don't sleep, Wesley replied simply. We document everything: video, multiple witness signatures, redundant data storage. We create a record so airtight that even Whitfield can't dispute it. He looked around at the team, his expression challenging. Unless you're ready to give up, one by one, determination replaced defeat in the faces around him. Zoe straightened her shoulders. I'll recalibrate the environmental chamber. I'll set up the recording equipment, another engineer volunteered. Dr. Harrison studied Wesley for a long moment before nodding slowly. I'll call my wife. Tell her not to expect me home tonight. As the team mobilized with renewed purpose, Wesley felt a familiar sensation he hadn't experienced in years. The focused clarity that came in genuine emergencies. Time seemed to slow and sharpen each moment, distinct and vital. He pulled out his phone to call Mrs. Harkins. Another night away from Maisie, another bedtime story missed. The guilt was familiar, but this time it was balanced by something else. The knowledge that what he was fighting for mattered. Not just for Black Innovations or Vivian, but for everyone who might someday depend on their system in a crisis. As he waited for Mrs. Harkins to answer, Wesley caught sight of his reflection in a darkened monitor screen. For a brief moment, he hardly recognized himself. The cautious mechanic of Cedar Creek had been replaced by someone more reminiscent of the rescue worker he'd once been, someone who faced impossible challenges and found a way through. The question was whether that transformation was temporary or permanent, and whether when this crisis passed, he would retreat to the safety of Cedar Creek or embrace the uncertainty of a new beginning. For now, though, there was work to be done. Tests to run, a project to save. And perhaps in saving it, he might also rediscover parts of himself long thought lost in the snow of another winter night. Dawn broke over San Francisco Bay, painting the water in shades of amber and gold. From the 37th floor of Black Innovations, the view was spectacular, a new day emerging with all its promise and possibility. But inside the R&D lab, no one had time to appreciate the sunrise. They had worked through the night running test after test, documenting each result with meticulous care. Wesley stood before the prototype, eyes burning from fatigue, but expression resolute. His shirt was rumpled, his beard untrimmed, but there was an energy about him that belied his exhaustion. Beside him, Dr. Harrison checked the final test results, nodding with satisfaction. Environmental resilience test complete, he confirmed, signing the data sheet and adding it to the thick binder they had compiled. The system maintained critical functions through simulated hurricane, blizzard, and earthquake conditions. Zoe approached, offering Wesley a steaming cup of coffee, his fifth since midnight. Power distribution stress tests also passed. The modified regulator performed exactly as you predicted. Wesley accepted the coffee gratefully. What time is the committee meeting? 9 o'clock, Zoe replied, checking her watch. Just over 2 hours from now. Dr. Harrison removed his glasses, cleaning them methodically as he had done countless times throughout the night. Do you think it will be enough? These results are impressive, but Whitfield has already shown he's willing to falsify data. That's why we've created redundant records, Wesley reminded him. Video documentation, multiple witnesses, paper backups. He can't alter all of it. The confidence in his voice was stronger than he felt. Corporate politics were an unfamiliar battlefield, and Wesley suspected Whitfield had weapons they hadn't anticipated. Still, they had done everything possible to protect the integrity of their work. I should clean up before the meeting, Wesley decided, looking down at his disheveled appearance. Can't fight corporate sharks looking like I slept under a workbench. There's a shower in the executive gym, Zoe offered. And I think Thomas keeps spare clothes in his office for emergencies. Wesley nodded gratefully. What about the rest of you? You should all get some rest. Dr. Harrison shook his head firmly. We'll be continuing final preparations for tomorrow's full board presentation. Assuming, of course, that the committee allows us to proceed. The unspoken concern hung in the air. Despite their all-night effort, everything still hinged on the committee meeting, a political hurdle rather than a technical one. As Wesley headed for the executive gym, his phone buzzed with a text from Maisie. Good morning, Dad. Mrs. Harkins says you're still saving the world. Can I come see today? A wave of longing hit him unexpectedly. In the rush of the past 24 hours, he had pushed aside his daily routine with Maisie, helping her with breakfast, walking her to the bus stop, their morning ritual of spotting shapes in the clouds. Small moments that anchored his life in Cedar Creek. Not today, Maze, he texted back. Important meeting, but soon, I promise. He paused, then added, love you to the moon and back. Her reply was immediate. And to the stars and home again. Good luck with your meeting. Wesley smiled, tucking the phone away. Whatever happened today, Maisie's unwavering support remained his true north. Freshly showered and dressed in borrowed clothes that fit surprisingly well, Wesley made his way to the executive conference room on the 40th floor. The space was imposing, all polished wood and floor-to-ceiling windows, with a massive table that could seat 20 comfortably. Vivian was already there reviewing documents with Thomas. She looked up as Wesley entered, her expression a careful mask of professional composure. If she had slept at all, there was no evidence of it. You clean up well, Mr. Grant. She observed, the formality of her tone a reminder that they were no longer in the relative privacy of the R&D lab. Thomas has good taste, Wesley replied, tugging slightly at the unfamiliar collar of the dress shirt. Though I draw the line at the tie, he offered. A ghost of a smile touched Vivian's lips before vanishing. The committee will be here shortly. We should review our strategy. Thomas spread several folders on the table. We have 3 committee members attending: Eleanor Chen, head of finance, James Peterson from legal, and of course Marcus Whitfield representing the board's executive committee. Eleanor and James are reasonable, Vivian added. They'll respond to evidence and logic. Marcus is the wild card. Not really a wild card if we know he's against us, Wesley pointed out. True, Vivian acknowledged, but the extent of his tactics remains unpredictable. She hesitated, then added in a lower voice, there's something else you should know. Marcus was my father's protege. Richard groomed him as a potential successor even after I took over as CEO. Their vision for the company has always aligned more closely than mine and my father's. The information added another layer to Wesley's understanding of the situation. This wasn't just corporate politics, it was personal. A battle for the soul of Black innovations between Richard's chosen successor and his own daughter. Is your father attending the meeting? Wesley asked. No, Vivian's expression tightened imperceptibly. He's in Tokyo, business as always. The echo of her childhood story hung between them, the father who had chosen business over family when her mother was dying. Some patterns, it seemed, never changed. Before Wesley could respond, the conference room door opened. Thomas straightened his posture, shifting subtly. They're here. Eleanor Chen entered first, a sharp-featured woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair cut in a precise bob. She nodded to Vivian with professional courtesy before taking a seat. James Peterson followed, a mild-mannered man with round glasses and a perpetually concerned expression. He carried a leather portfolio bulging with documents. Last came Marcus Whitfield. Tall and impeccably dressed, with silver-streaked dark hair and the confident bearing of someone who rarely encountered opposition, he surveyed the room like a general assessing a battlefield. His gaze lingered on Wesley with undisguised curiosity. Vivian, he greeted smoothly, taking a seat directly across from her. I see we have a guest this morning. This is Wesley Grant, Vivian replied evenly, technical consultant on the Emergency Response Systems project, and the reason we've made such remarkable progress in the past month. Marcus's smile didn't reach his eyes. Ah, yes, the mechanic from Cedar Creek, your mountain rescue hero. The deliberate emphasis on mechanic made the word sound like an insult. Wesley felt a flicker of anger, but kept his expression neutral. This wasn't the time for wounded pride. Let's begin, shall we? Eleanor suggested, opening a folder. We're here to address Mr. Whitfield's concerns regarding resource allocation for the ERS project and the unusual staffing decisions. James cleared his throat. Before we proceed, I should note that there are potential conflict of interest concerns that we're all aware of the circumstances, Marcus interrupted smoothly. Vivian was stranded in a blizzard, and Mr. Grant here came to her rescue. A dramatic story with a happy ending. The question isn't about gratitude, it's about whether personal obligation has clouded business judgment. Vivian's posture remained rigidly professional. Mr. Grant's involvement with the project is based solely on his qualifications and expertise. His background in emergency response, combined with his practical mechanical knowledge, has proven invaluable. So you've said, Marcus replied. Yet we have only your word for his supposed qualifications. And more concerning, we have evidence that the project itself is fundamentally flawed. With theatrical timing, he produced a folder and distributed copies to Eleanor and James. These are the safety test results from the ERS prototype. As you can see, it failed critical assessments just 3 days ago. Wesley leaned forward. Those results are falsified. The blunt accusation landed like a stone in still water. Eleanor's eyebrows rose sharply while James looked distinctly uncomfortable. That's a serious allegation, Mr. Grant. Marcus responded, his tone dangerously soft. Are you suggesting that someone within Black Innovations deliberately tampered with official records? I'm not suggesting it, Wesley replied firmly. I'm stating it as fact. I was present for those tests. The system performed perfectly. He nodded to Thomas, who distributed their own folders, the comprehensive documentation compiled during their all-night testing marathon. These are the actual results, Wesley continued, verified by multiple witnesses, recorded on video, and signed by Dr. Harrison, who is prepared to testify to their accuracy. Eleanor began reviewing the new documents with focused attention. James flipped nervously between the two sets of results, clearly disturbed by the discrepancy. Marcus remained unruffled. Anyone can run new tests and claim they're valid. The question remains, why should we trust the word of an unqualified outsider over our established protocols? Wesley felt Vivian tense beside him, but continued calmly. My qualifications are included in that packet. 15 years as an emergency response specialist with the Mountain Rescue Association, certified in advanced wilderness survival emergency, medical response, and critical incident management. He met Marcus's gaze directly. I've led teams into situations where equipment failure meant death. I've designed field modifications for standard gear when factory specs couldn't handle real-world conditions. And yes, now I fix cars in Cedar Creek because life took an unexpected turn. But that doesn't erase my expertise or my contributions to this project. A small silence followed his words. Even Marcus seemed momentarily at a loss for a counter-argument. Eleanor broke the silence looking up from the documents. These new test results are exceptionally thorough, and the video documentation provides compelling evidence. We worked through the night to recreate every test, Vivian explained, precisely because we anticipated challenges to the data integrity. James adjusted his glasses nervously. This raises serious questions about how the original data was modified. If what you're suggesting is true, someone with high-level access deliberately sabotaged the project records. All eyes turned to Marcus, whose expression remained impassive. Let's not jump to unfounded conclusions. Data corruption happens for many reasons. The relevant question is whether this project deserves continued funding given its troubled development history. The project has not had a troubled development history, Vivian countered firmly. It has had remarkable success in record time thanks largely to Mr. Grant's innovations. She turned to Eleanor and James. I invited you both to visit the lab yesterday afternoon. You saw the prototype in action. Did it appear troubled to you? Eleanor's expression softened slightly. I was impressed by the demonstration. The system's resilience in simulated emergency conditions was particularly noteworthy. As was the simplified interface, James added. My technology-challenged mother could operate it, which is saying something. Marcus's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Impressive demonstrations are one thing. Commercial viability is another. The market for specialized emergency equipment is limited at best, and the development costs have already exceeded projections. Actually, Vivian replied, sliding another folder across the table, our market analysis suggests otherwise. The initial ERS units would target emergency response agencies and remote medical facilities. But the core technology, particularly Mr. Grant's modified power regulator, has applications across multiple industries. Eleanor picked up the folder with renewed interest. Go on. The adaptive power management system could revolutionize off-grid energy solutions for everything from remote construction sites to military operations. Vivian explained, we're not just building an emergency power unit, we're developing a platform technology with diverse applications. Wesley watched the dynamic shift as Eleanor and James engaged more deeply with the market projections. Marcus, sensing the momentum turning against him, changed tactics. This all sounds very promising in theory, he conceded with calculated graciousness. But we still have the fundamental issue of Mr. Grant's involvement. The appearance of impropriety. There is no impropriety. Vivian interrupted, her composure finally cracking slightly. Wesley Grant was hired because his expertise was exactly what this project needed. The results speak for themselves. Do they, Marcus raised an eyebrow, or do they speak to your willingness to divert company resources toward personal interests? First, the reinstatement of the Employee Assistance Program at Horizon Energy, a puzzling priority given its minimal ROI, and now this rescue equipment project that aligns so conveniently with your recent adventure. Wesley felt a cold sensation settle in his stomach. Marcus wasn't just attacking the project, he was suggesting a pattern of compromised judgment. And he had somehow learned about the connection between Wesley and the Employee Assistance Program. The ERS project was initiated before I met Mr. Grant. Vivian pointed out, her voice steady despite the provocation. And the Employee Assistance Program reinstatement was a separate ethical decision based on correcting a previous error in judgment. An error that coincidentally affected Mr. Grant's family, Marcus noted with feigned casualness. The revelation hung in the air. Eleanor and James exchanged glances, clearly reassessing the situation in light of this new information. Wesley had remained silent during this exchange, but now he straightened in his chair. Decision made. May I address the committee directly? Eleanor nodded, curiosity evident in her expression. Mr. Whitfield is correct about one thing, Wesley began. The Employee Assistance Program at Horizon Energy did affect my family. My late wife, Sarah, was receiving critical medical support through that program when it was cut after the acquisition by Black Innovations. He paused, allowing the admission to register. What Mr. Whitfield doesn't know or has chosen to ignore is that I declined Ms. Black's initial job offer precisely because of that history. I wanted nothing to do with the company I blamed for abandoning my wife when she needed help most. The honesty of this statement seemed to catch everyone off guard, Marcus included. What changed your mind? Eleanor asked quietly. Wesley looked directly at Vivian before answering. She came back, with proof that she was trying to make it right, not just for my family, but for everyone affected by that decision, and with a project that could save lives in situations like the one that took my wife. He turned back to the committee. I'm not here because Vivian Black rescued me. I'm here because working on this project gives meaning to my wife's death. If the system we're building had existed 5 years ago, Sarah might still be alive. The room fell silent. Even Marcus seemed momentarily at a loss for words, the human reality behind the corporate maneuvering suddenly inescapable. Eleanor was the first to recover. Thank you for your candor, Mr. Grant. It clarifies a great deal. James nodded in agreement, though he still looked troubled by the complexities of the situation. Marcus, recognizing the shift in mood, pivoted smoothly. A moving personal story to be sure, but we still have fiduciary responsibilities to consider. The board expects us to make decisions based on the best interests of the company, Eleanor interrupted firmly. Having reviewed both the technical and market analyses, I believe the ERS project shows considerable promise. I see no reason to halt its development before the full board presentation tomorrow. James hesitated, then added his support. From a legal perspective, while the circumstances of Mr. Grant's hiring were unusual, his qualifications appear legitimate and his contributions substantive. I concur with Eleanor's assessment. Marcus's expression hardened, the mask of collegial discussion slipping to reveal the calculation beneath. I see I'm outvoted on this committee. Very well. The project will proceed to tomorrow's board presentation. He gathered his papers with deliberate precision. But I caution you both, and you, Vivian, that Richard will have questions about the direction this company is taking under your leadership. Questions that may be difficult to answer. The threat was thinly veiled. Marcus would be speaking to Richard Black before tomorrow's meeting. The battle had been postponed, not won. As the committee members filed out, Vivian remained seated, her posture rigid with controlled tension. Only when the door closed behind them did she allow herself a slow exhale. That went about as well as could be expected, Thomas observed, breaking the silence. Marcus won't give up, Vivian replied. He'll call my father immediately. Wesley studied her with concern. Will that change things? It depends. Vivian's voice was carefully neutral. Richard still owns controlling interest in the company, though he's largely stepped back from day-to-day operations. If Marcus convinces him the ERS project threatens Black Innovation's financial performance, she didn't need to finish the thought. Richard Black, from everything Wesley had gathered, valued profit above all else. The very philosophy Vivian was trying to change. Then we make sure the presentation tomorrow addresses the financial angle as thoroughly as the technical one, Wesley said firmly. We show that doing good and doing well aren't mutually exclusive. Vivian looked at him with something like wonder. How do you do that? Do what? Remain so optimistic in the face of setbacks. Find solutions instead of dwelling on problems. Wesley considered the question seriously. I suppose it comes from rescue work. When you're searching for a lost hiker in a blizzard, giving up isn't an option. You keep going because someone's life depends on it. And now, Vivian asked softly, what keeps you going now? The question carried weight beyond its surface meaning. Wesley felt it settle in his chest, demanding an honest answer. Knowing that what we're building matters, he replied, that it could save someone else from going through what I did. And he hesitated, then continued, seeing you fight for something beyond profit, it reminds me there are still battles worth fighting. Their eyes met across the table, the connection between them deepening beyond professional respect or shared adversity. In that moment, Wesley recognized that his decision about returning to Cedar Creek had become considerably more complicated. Thomas cleared his throat discreetly. The R&D team is waiting for an update, and Dr. Harrison mentioned some final refinements to the prototype before tomorrow's presentation. The interruption broke the moment, returning them to the immediate challenges ahead. Wesley stood suddenly aware of the bone-deep fatigue from their all-night testing session. I should check on the team, he said. Make sure those refinements don't compromise what we've already established. And I need to prepare for my father's inevitable call. Vivian added, her professional mask slipping back into place. Thomas, have the company apartment prepared for Mr. Grant. He'll need rest before tomorrow's presentation. Wesley started to protest. I can find a hotel. The apartment is 2 floors down. Vivian cut him off. You need actual sleep, not a commute across the city. Consider it a practical decision, not a luxury. The logic was irrefutable, especially given his exhaustion. Wesley nodded his acceptance and headed for the elevator. In the R&D lab, the team greeted his arrival with barely contained anticipation. Well, Zoe demanded, are we still in business? For now, Wesley confirmed. The committee approved us to proceed to tomorrow's board presentation. A cheer went up from the assembled engineers. Dr. Harrison allowed himself a rare smile. Your documentation strategy worked perfectly. I've never seen such thoroughly vetted test results. Now we just need to make sure the prototype lives up to its paperwork, Wesley replied. What are these final refinements you mentioned? For the next several hours, Wesley worked with the team on small but crucial improvements to the ERS unit. The ceiling issue had been completely resolved with his flexible approach, and the power regulator was performing beyond expectations. All that remained were cosmetic enhancements and user interface refinements for the demonstration. By late afternoon, exhaustion was catching up with him. Even simple tasks required increasing concentration, and Wesley knew he needed rest before tomorrow's crucial presentation. That's it for me, he announced, setting down his tools. The prototype is ready. You've all done amazing work. Dr. Harrison nodded in agreement. Get some sleep, Mr. Grant. Tomorrow will be challenging enough without sleep deprivation clouding your judgment. As Wesley headed for the elevator, his phone buzzed with a text from Vivian. Meeting with Richards scheduled for 7 a.m. tomorrow. Board presentation still on for 10 a.m. Company apartment ready on 38th floor. Access code 4729. He texted back a simple acknowledgement noting the lack of personal comment. Whatever moment they had shared in the conference room had been set aside in favor of professional focus. Understandable given the stakes, but Wesley felt a twinge of disappointment nonetheless. The company apartment proved to be a spacious one-bedroom suite with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a stunning view of the city. Wesley barely registered the luxury furnishings or well-stocked kitchen. After a quick shower, he collapsed onto the king-size bed asleep almost before his head hit the pillow. His dreams were a confused jumble of memories and anxieties. Sarah's face morphed into Vivian's and back again. The wrecked Jaguar became his own truck the night of Sarah's accident. Maisie called to him from across a snowy expanse that grew wider with each step he took. Wesley woke with a start, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings. The digital clock beside the bed read 2:17 a.m. Despite having slept for nearly 6 hours, he felt restless, his mind already racing with thoughts of the coming day. Rising, he moved to the window, gazing out at the city lights. San Francisco sprawled before him, a constellation of artificial stars against the darkness. So different from Cedar Creek, where streetlights were few, and the night sky revealed actual stars in abundance. His phone lay on the nightstand, and on impulse, Wesley picked it up and dialed a familiar number. Despite the hour, Mrs. Harkins answered on the third ring, her voice alert despite the early hour. Wesley, is everything all right? Fine, he assured her quickly. Sorry to call so late. I just wanted to check on Maisie. She's sleeping like an angel, Mrs. Harkins replied, her tone softening. Had a bit of a moment at bedtime missing you, but she rallied after we called you earlier. Wesley felt a pang of guilt. He had spoken briefly with Maisie before bed, but his mind had been preoccupied with the prototype refinements. Had he been fully present for her, I should be home tomorrow evening, he told Mrs. Harkins, after the board presentation. Will that be the end of it then, she asked. This consulting work? The question echoed his own thoughts from earlier. I'm not sure, he admitted. Things are complicated. They usually are when the heart gets involved, Mrs. Harkins observed with the wisdom of her 83 years. Wesley started to protest, but found he couldn't form a convincing denial. Was his heart involved? With the project, certainly. With Vivian, that was the complication. Get some rest, Wesley, Mrs. Harkins advised gently. Whatever decision you're facing, it'll be clearer after a good night's sleep. After ending the call, Wesley remained by the window watching the city below. Somewhere out there, Vivian was likely also awake, preparing for her early morning meeting with her father. A meeting that could determine the fate of the project they had both poured themselves into. He thought of the woman he had first met in the blizzard, guarded, privileged, seemingly disconnected from ordinary struggles. And of the woman he had come to know, since passionate about creating technology that mattered, willing to challenge her own past mistakes, fighting to reshape her father's company into something more than a profit machine. The transformation was remarkable, or perhaps it wasn't a transformation at all, but rather the revealing of what had always been there beneath the corporate armor. And what about his own changes? The mechanic of Cedar Creek had reemerged as something closer to the rescue worker he had once been. Problem-solving, innovation, purpose, all had returned to his life in ways he had thought permanently lost after Sarah's death. Could he really walk away from that tomorrow? Return to the garage and the comfortable, predictable life he had built? Or was Mrs. Harkins right? Had his heart already made a decision his mind wasn't ready to acknowledge? Dawn found Wesley in the R&D lab, making final adjustments to the prototype. He had given up on further sleep, preferring productive work to restless contemplation. The lab was deserted at this early hour, the silence broken only by the occasional hum of equipment and the soft click of tools against metal. "I thought I might find you here." Wesley looked up to find Vivian standing in the doorway. She was dressed formally in a tailored charcoal suit, her hair swept into an elegant updo armor for the battle ahead. But there were shadows beneath her eyes that makeup couldn't quite conceal. "Couldn't sleep," Wesley explained, setting down his tools. "Thought I'd give the prototype one last check." Vivian approached, studying the unit with critical attention. "How is it?" "Perfect," Wesley replied with quiet confidence. "It'll do everything we promised and then some." She nodded, though her attention seemed elsewhere. Wesley recognized the signs of preoccupation. "You're meeting with Richard," he guessed. "You're worried." "Marcus called him last night," Vivian confirmed. "They spoke for over an hour. And my father wants to know why I'm risking the company's resources on humanitarian pet projects instead of focusing on our core business." The bitterness in her voice was palpable. Wesley set down his tools entirely, giving her his full attention. "What will you tell him?" Vivian's gaze shifted to the prototype. "The truth that this isn't just a humanitarian project, it's an innovation with genuine market potential. That we're not choosing between doing good and doing well. We're finding ways to do both simultaneously. And if he doesn't accept that, then we have a problem," she admitted. "Richard still controls the board. If he sides with Marcus decisively—" She didn't need to finish the thought. Wesley understood the implications all too well. "What can I do to help?" he asked simply. Vivian looked at him with genuine surprise. "You've already done more than I had any right to expect. The prototype is ready. The presentation is prepared. The rest is corporate politics, not your battlefield." "Maybe it should be," Wesley replied. "At least for today." He hesitated, then continued. "When Sarah died, I withdrew from everything that mattered to me. Rescue work, helping others, making a difference. I buried it all under grief and fear. Coming here, working on this project, it woke something up that I thought was gone forever." Vivian's expression softened. "Wesley, let me finish," he said gently. "I'm not sure what happens after today, whether I stay in San Francisco or go back to Cedar Creek. But I am sure about one thing: I want to see this through. Not just the prototype or the presentation, but the vision behind it. Technology that saves lives instead of just making them more convenient." He met her gaze directly. "So if facing Richard Black helps make that happen, then it's absolutely my battlefield too." For a moment, Vivian seemed at a loss for words. Then, with a vulnerability she rarely displayed, she asked, "Would you come with me to the meeting with my father?" The request surprised him. "Are you sure that's wise? Won't it just confirm his suspicions about personal connections clouding business decisions?" "Possibly," she acknowledged, "but he needs to see what I see, that your expertise is real, your contribution invaluable. Richard respects competence above almost everything else. If he can recognize yours—" Wesley understood the strategy. Richard Black might dismiss his daughter's judgment as compromised, but he would have a harder time dismissing demonstrable expertise regardless of its source. "When do we leave?" he asked, decision made. "Now," Vivian replied, glancing at her watch. "He's already waiting." Richard Black maintained an office on the 50th floor, the pinnacle of the Black Innovations Tower. Unlike the open modern spaces on the lower floors, his domain was classically appointed with dark wood paneling, leather furniture, and subdued lighting. It spoke of old money and traditional power, a stark contrast to the innovation the company supposedly championed. The man himself sat behind a massive desk reviewing documents with focused attention. In his 70s now, Richard Black remained imposing, tall and lean, with a full head of silver hair and the same storm gray eyes as his daughter. When he looked up at their entrance, Wesley saw none of Vivian's warmth in his gaze, only cool assessment. "Vivian," he acknowledged, setting aside his papers. His eyes shifted to Wesley. "And this must be the famous Mr. Grant." "Thank you for seeing us, Richard," Vivian replied formally. Wesley noted at her use of her father's first name, a small but significant indicator of their relationship. "I agreed to see you," Richard corrected, gesturing to two chairs positioned before his desk. "Mr. Grant's presence was not part of our arrangement." "Mr. Grant is integral to the ERS project," Vivian stated calmly, taking a seat. "If we're discussing its future, he should be present." Richard's expression remained impassive, but Wesley sensed his recalculation. He had expected to face his daughter alone, perhaps to pressure her without witnesses. Vivian had disrupted that plan with Wesley's presence. "Very well," Richard conceded with practiced graciousness. "Perhaps Mr. Grant can explain why a career mechanic from Cedar Creek is suddenly qualified to lead a multi-million-dollar technology development at one of the world's premier innovation companies." The question was delivered with precision, designed to establish Wesley's outsider status from the outset. But Wesley had faced too many life-and-death situations to be intimidated by corporate power plays. "I'm not leading the development, Mr. Black," he replied evenly. "I'm consulting on specific aspects where my experience is relevant. And before I was a mechanic, I spent 15 years in emergency response and rescue operations." He held Richard's gaze without challenge but without deference. "Tools and technology are only as good as their performance when everything goes wrong. That's my area of expertise." Richard leaned back slightly, reassessing. "And your assessment of the ERS project? It has the potential to save lives in situations where traditional systems fail," Wesley stated simply. "Beyond that, the core technology has applications across multiple industries, from construction to military to remote healthcare." Richard's attention shifted back to Vivian. "Marcus tells me you've diverted substantial resources to this project, resources that were allocated to our core business initiatives." "I reprioritized," Vivian corrected. "The market analysis and projected ROI justify the investment, as you'll see in today's presentation." "Marcus has a different perspective on those projections." "Marcus has a different agenda," Vivian countered, a hint of steel entering her voice. "One that aligns more with your vision for Black innovations than with mine." The statement hung in the air, direct and unapologetic. Richard's eyes narrowed slightly, but Wesley detected a flicker of something like respect in his expression. "My vision built this company from nothing," Richard replied, "transformed it from a garage startup to a global technology leader. That vision has served us well." "It has," Vivian acknowledged, "but the world is changing. Corporate success isn't measured solely by quarterly profits anymore. Consumers, investors, even employees are demanding more companies that contribute positively to society while delivering financial returns." She leaned forward slightly. "The ERS project embodies that dual purpose. It addresses a genuine need, creates new market opportunities, and positions Black innovations as a leader in socially responsible technology." Richard's expression remained unreadable. "Noble sentiments, but sentiment doesn't pay dividends." "Innovation does," Wesley interjected, "and sometimes the most valuable innovations come from unexpected places." Both Blacks turned to look at him, surprised by his interjection into their family dynamic. "When I was in rescue work," Wesley continued, "we constantly modified standard equipment to handle conditions the manufacturers never anticipated. Those field innovations often became standard features in the next generation of products. Why? Because they solved real problems that laboratory testing never revealed." He gestured toward the window where San Francisco spread out below them. "Black innovations has some of the brightest minds in technology. But how many of them have ever been in a life-or-death situation where equipment failure meant someone didn't come home? How many have had to repair a critical system with freezing hands while a storm closes in?" Wesley leaned forward, passion evident in his voice. "That perspective matters. It leads to innovations that might never emerge from traditional R&D processes. The modified power regulator we developed for the ERS is a perfect example. It's already being explored for applications in your renewable energy and transportation divisions. Richard studied Wesley with new interest. You speak with conviction, Mr. Grant. Because I've lived the consequences of technology that fails when it's needed most, Wesley replied simply. My wife died because help couldn't reach us in time during a winter storm. The ERS might not have saved her, but it represents the kind of thinking that could save someone else's wife, husband, or child. The personal revelation landed with quiet force. Even Richard Black, master of corporate detachment, seemed momentarily affected. I'm sorry for your loss, he said, the words formal, but not insincere. But personal tragedy, however affecting, cannot be the basis for corporate strategy. It isn't, Vivian stated firmly. The ERS project stands on its own merits technically and financially. All we're asking is that you allow us to present those merits to the full board as scheduled. Richard was silent for a long moment, his fingers steepled before him as he considered. Finally, he nodded once. The presentation will proceed, he decided. I make no commitments beyond that, but I will reserve judgment until I've seen the full proposal. It wasn't the enthusiastic endorsement they might have hoped for, but it was a reprieve, a chance to make their case to the broader board rather than having the project terminated by executive fiat. Thank you, Richard, Vivian said, rising from her chair. We appreciate your consideration. As they turned to leave, Richard spoke again. Mr. Grant. Wesley paused, looking back. Regardless of the board's decision on the ERS project, your perspective on field applications has merit. Black Innovations could benefit from more practical insight in our development process. The statement hung in the air, not quite a job offer, but certainly an acknowledgement of value. Wesley nodded his thanks, unsure how to respond to this unexpected recognition from Richard Black. In the elevator descending from the 50th floor, Vivian finally allowed herself a deep breath. That went better than expected, she admitted. Richard actually listened. He rarely does that anymore. He's a shrewd businessman, Wesley observed. Even if he doesn't share your values, he recognizes a valid perspective when he hears one. Vivian glanced at him curiously. You handled him well. Most people either cower or posture around my father. I've faced worse than disapproving CEOs, Wesley replied with a small smile. Grizzly bears avalanches hypothermia. Richard Black barely makes the top 10. The joke coaxed a genuine laugh from Vivian, breaking the tension that had built during the meeting. For a moment, they were simply two people sharing relief after a difficult encounter. As the elevator approached the R&D floor, however, Vivian's expression grew serious again. The real test is still ahead. The board presentation will determine everything. Then let's make sure it's perfect, Wesley replied. He checked his watch, just over 2 hours to finalize everything. The next 120 minutes passed in a blur of focused activity. The R&D team, energized by the news that the presentation would proceed, made final adjustments to the prototype and demonstration. Dr. Harrison rehearsed his technical overview one last time, while Zoe fine-tuned the multimedia presentation that would accompany their live demonstration. Wesley found himself at the center of preparation for the practical demonstration. The board wouldn't just hear about the ERS, they would see it subjected to simulated emergency conditions right in the boardroom. At precisely 9:55 a.m., they gathered outside the main boardroom on the 49th floor. The prototype, securely mounted on a demonstration cart, had been thoroughly tested one final time. The presentation materials were loaded and ready. All that remained was the human element, the conviction and expertise they would bring to their case. Vivian addressed the team quietly. Whatever happens in there, I want you all to know that what we've created together represents the best of Black Innovations. Not just technical excellence, but purpose-driven innovation that matters. Her gaze lingered on Wesley for a moment longer than the others. Some of you might not be here beyond today's presentation, but you've all left your mark on something important. The words carried a weight beyond their surface meaning. Wesley felt them settle in his chest, a recognition of transitions yet to come. Whether the project succeeded or failed, changes were inevitable for the company, for the team, for him personally. Thomas appeared at the boardroom door. They're ready for you. The Black Innovations boardroom occupied the entire northwest corner of the 49th floor, offering panoramic views of the city and bay beyond. Around a massive oval table sat 15 people, the combined executive leadership and board of directors. At the far end, Richard Black had taken the chairman's position. Beside him, Marcus Whitfield wore an expression of polite interest that didn't reach his eyes. As Vivian began her introduction, Wesley surveyed the room, assessing their audience. Most appeared genuinely engaged, though a few seemed to have already formed opinions. The next hour would determine whether their month of work would become reality or remain merely a promising prototype. The emergency response system represents a new direction for Black innovations. Vivian explained, her voice steady and confident. Not a departure from our commitment to technological excellence, but an evolution of how we apply that excellence to real-world challenges. She gestured to Dr. Harrison, who began the technical overview with his customary precision. As he spoke, Wesley prepared for his own role in the presentation, the practical demonstration that would bring the technical specifications to life. When his moment came, Wesley stepped forward, all traces of the small-town mechanic temporarily set aside. In this moment, he was the emergency response expert, the practical innovator, the bridge between theoretical capability and real-world application. In an actual emergency, he began, his voice carrying clearly through the room, technology doesn't operate under ideal conditions. Power fluctuates. Environmental factors intrude. Human operators are stressed, possibly injured, and working with limited information. He activated the prototype, its control panel illuminating with reassuring clarity. The ERS is designed with these realities in mind. Every feature, every interface element, every backup system exists to ensure one thing, that when everything else fails, this system continues to provide the critical functions that sustain life and enable rescue. For the next 20 minutes, Wesley demonstrated the system's capabilities under increasingly challenging simulated conditions. Water was poured directly onto the control panel. The main power input was deliberately compromised. The unit was subjected to impact that would have disabled most electronic devices. Through it all, the core functions, emergency communication, medical equipment, power, and essential lighting remained operational. The ERS didn't just survive, it adapted, redirecting resources exactly as Wesley's modified power regulator had been designed to do. Even Marcus looked grudgingly impressed by the demonstration. Several board members were taking detailed notes, and Richard's expression had shifted from skeptical to thoughtful. As Wesley concluded the practical portion, Vivian stepped forward to present the market analysis and financial projections. Here was the crucial bridge between innovation and business viability, the argument that would determine whether the board saw the ERS as a worthwhile investment or a well-intentioned diversion. Initial market penetration would focus on emergency response agencies, remote medical facilities, and disaster preparedness organizations, Vivian explained, displaying projected adoption curves on the main screen. But the core technology, particularly the adaptive power management system, has applications far beyond the emergency sector. She outlined potential implementations in renewable energy, remote industrial operations, and even consumer technology. With each application, she presented conservative but compelling revenue projections, building a comprehensive case for the ERS as not just a socially responsible initiative, but a genuine business opportunity. As she concluded, Wesley felt a surge of pride, not just in the technology they had created, but in Vivian herself. She had masterfully bridged the gap between purpose and profit, presenting a vision of Black innovations that honored its tradition of excellence while evolving its definition of success. Richard Black was the first to speak after the presentation concluded. Impressive work, particularly given the compressed timeline. The practical resilience of the system is especially noteworthy. He turned to Marcus. Your concerns about technical viability seem to have been addressed rather thoroughly. Marcus shifted slightly, recalibrating his approach. The technology itself is certainly promising. My concerns were never about capability, but about market priority and resource allocation. Given our existing commitments in the consumer sector, innovation rarely follows convenient schedules. Richard interrupted, surprising everyone with his apparent support. Sometimes opportunities emerge from unexpected directions. He turned to address the broader board. I propose we approve continued development of the ERS platform with scaled production of the initial emergency units to begin within 60 days pending final certification. The statement landed like a thunderclap in the room. Not only was Richard endorsing the project, but he was accelerating its timeline beyond even Vivian's proposed schedule. Marcus recovered quickly. With all due respect, Richard's such an aggressive timeline carries significant risk. Perhaps a more measured approach. Black innovations wasn't built through measured approaches. Richard cut him off again. It was built by recognizing opportunity and moving decisively. The ERS represents such an opportunity both technically and in terms of market positioning. He turned to Vivian, his expression unreadable. The project will require dedicated leadership, someone who understands both the technical requirements and the practical applications. Vivian nodded. Dr. Harrison is well qualified to lead the technical development, and I've been considering establishing a new division focused on emergency and adaptive technologies. I was thinking of someone with more direct experience. Richard replied, his gaze shifting to Wesley. Someone who's already demonstrated the ability to bridge theoretical capacity and practical application. The implication hung in the air, stunning Wesley as much as everyone else in the room. Was Richard Black, who had barely acknowledged his existence before today's presentation, suggesting he lead the ERS division? Before Wesley could process this unexpected development, Marcus made a final attempt to assert control. While Mr. Grant's contributions to the prototype are acknowledged, installing an outside consultant with no corporate experience as a division head would be unprecedented and potentially disruptive. Richard's expression hardened slightly. So was my decision to make Vivian CEO when many expected you to take that position, Marcus. Yet here we are, still growing, still innovating. The rebuke was delivered with quiet precision, effectively ending further debate. Richard turned to the board secretary. Please record the board's approval of the ERS project as presented with scaled production to begin within 60 days. Further organizational details will be finalized by the executive committee. With that, the meeting was adjourned. As board members filed out, many paused to congratulate Vivian and examine the prototype more closely. Wesley found himself surrounded by curious executives, fielding technical questions and receiving unexpected praise for his practical innovations. Through it all, he felt strangely disconnected, his mind still processing Richard's implied job offer and its implications. After a month of assuming his time at Black Innovations was temporary, the possibility of permanence had suddenly materialized. A new direction, a new purpose, a new life in San Francisco, far from the quiet predictability of Cedar Creek. And Maisie, how would she adapt to city schools? New friends, a different rhythm of life. She had seemed enthusiastic about the possibility, but children's enthusiasm didn't always translate to successful transitions. As the boardroom gradually emptied, Wesley found himself alone with Vivian and Richard. The father and daughter regarded each other with a complex mixture of professional respect and personal distance, their relationship clearly shaped more by business than blood. You surprised me today, Vivian admitted to her father. I expected resistance, not support. Richard straightened his already impeccable tie. I may not always agree with your methods, Vivian, but I recognize innovation when I see it. The ERS project has merit both technically and commercially. His gaze shifted to Wesley, as does Mr. Grant's contribution. His practical perspective highlighted gaps in our traditional development approach that might otherwise have gone unaddressed. Wesley found his voice at last. Thank you for your support, Mr. Black. But I should clarify, I haven't decided whether to remain with Black Innovations beyond my initial consulting period. Richard raised an eyebrow. You would decline a division leadership role, the opportunity to see your innovations deployed globally. It's not about the opportunity, Wesley explained carefully. It's about personal considerations. I have a daughter, a life established elsewhere. Understanding dawned in Richard's expression. Ah, yes, the responsibilities of parenthood. Something in his tone suggested this was a concept he understood intellectually rather than emotionally, a factor to be acknowledged rather than a priority to be honored. Wesley thought of Vivian's childhood story of the father who chose business over family when her mother lay dying. My daughter comes first, Wesley stated simply. Any decision I make has to consider her well-being above all else. Rather than dismissing this priority, Richard nodded with what appeared to be genuine respect, a principled position. Take the time you need to consider. The offer remains open. With that, he departed, leaving Wesley and Vivian alone in the massive boardroom. For a moment, neither spoke, the weight of possibility and decision hanging between them. Well, Vivian finally said, a smile breaking through her professional composure. That wasn't how I expected this to go. Wesley shook his head, still processing. Your father is not what I anticipated. Richard is full of surprises, Vivian agreed. All of them calculated to maximum advantage, but surprises nonetheless. She hesitated, then added more softly, You don't have to decide anything today, about staying. I know, Wesley acknowledged, but I should get back to Cedar Creek soon. Maisie's been with Mrs. Harkins for too long already. Of course. Vivian's expression revealed nothing of her thoughts on his potential departure. The company jet can take you home this afternoon if you'd like. The offer was delivered with professional courtesy, masking whatever personal feelings might lie beneath. Wesley felt a twinge of disappointment at her detachment, though he understood it. They had achieved their professional goal. The personal connection that had developed alongside it remained undefined, uncommitted. Thank you, he replied, matching her tone. That would be convenient. As they walked toward the elevator, Wesley found himself searching for the right words to acknowledge what had grown between them, the respect, the understanding, perhaps even the beginnings of something deeper. But before he could formulate his thoughts, his phone rang. It was Mrs. Harkins, her voice tight with controlled panic. Wesley, you need to come home now. There's been an accident at the school. Maisie's in the hospital. The words hit Wesley like a physical blow, draining the color from his face. What happened? Is she? She's stable, Mrs. Harkins assured him quickly. A fall from the playground equipment. Broken arm, possible concussion. The doctors want to keep her overnight for observation. Wesley's world narrowed to a single imperative. I'm on my way. Tell her I'm coming. He ended the call, already turning toward the elevator with renewed urgency. I have to go. Now. Maisie's in the hospital. Vivian's professional mask vanished instantly, replaced by genuine concern. What happened? Is she all right? Fall at school? Broken arm, possible concussion. Wesley's responses were clipped, his mind already racing ahead to Cedar Creek, to his daughter alone in a hospital bed. I need to get home immediately. The company helicopter, not the jet, Vivian decided, pulling out her phone. It can land directly at Cedar Creek Municipal instead of the regional airport. I'll make the arrangements now. As they rode the elevator down, Vivian made rapid-fire calls, mobilizing Black Innovation's resources with the same efficiency she brought to corporate operations. By the time they reached the lobby, the helicopter was being prepared for immediate departure. It will be ready in 15 minutes, she informed him. I've sent a car to take you to the helipad. Wesley nodded gratefully, the gesture inadequate for the depth of his appreciation. Thank you. Vivian hesitated, then asked the question that hung between them. Would you like me to come with you? The offer surprised him, revealing a willingness to step beyond professional boundaries that Vivian had maintained so carefully. For a moment, Wesley was tempted to accept, to have her steady presence beside him as he faced yet another crisis. But this was different from their shared ordeal in the blizzard. This was his daughter, his responsibility, his world in Cedar Creek. Whatever had grown between him and Vivian, it hadn't yet earned a place in that most personal sphere of his life. I appreciate the offer, he said gently, but I think this is something I need to handle on my own. Understanding filled her eyes without hurt or offense. Of course, but if you need anything at all, call me. Black Innovations has relationships with the best medical specialists in the country. One call and they'll be on their way to Cedar Creek. The offer was characteristic of Vivian, practical support rather than empty sympathy. Wesley felt a surge of gratitude mixed with something deeper, something he wasn't ready to name in this moment of crisis. I will, he promised, and thank you for everything. They stood facing each other in the vast lobby, countless words unspoken between them. The crisis with Maisie had abruptly suspended the question of Wesley's future, whether he would accept Richard's offer, whether he would settle in San Francisco, whether what had begun between him and Vivian might have a chance to grow. Go, Vivian said softly. Maisie needs you. As the car pulled away from Black Innovation's tower, Wesley caught a final glimpse of Vivian through the rear window, standing alone amid the bustle of the lobby. In that moment, the distance between their worlds seemed both vast and insignificant, a gap that could be bridged by choice, if only he were ready to make it. The helicopter ride to Cedar Creek passed in a blur of anxiety and impatience. Wesley's mind filled with images of Maisie in pain, scared, asking for him. The rational part of him knew that a broken arm, while serious, was far from life-threatening. But rationality offered little comfort to a father separated from his injured child. Cedar Creek Community Hospital was a modest two-story building that served the town and surrounding rural areas. Wesley burst through the emergency room doors, his heart pounding. "Maisie Grant," he told the receptionist, his voice tight with controlled panic. "My daughter. She was brought in after a fall at school." "Dad." The small voice drew his attention immediately. Maisie sat propped up in a bed visible through the partially open curtains of a treatment bay. Her left arm was immobilized in a temporary cast, and a butterfly bandage adorned her forehead, but her eyes brightened at the sight of him. Wesley was at her side in an instant, careful not to jostle her injured arm as he gathered her into a gentle embrace. "Hey, Maze, I came as fast as I could." "You came in a helicopter," Maisie exclaimed, her injury momentarily forgotten in the excitement. "Mrs. Harkins said Miss Vivian sent it special for you." Wesley smiled despite his worry, smoothing back her hair. "She did. She was very concerned about you." Dr. Miller, who had been Maisie's physician since birth, entered with a tablet in hand. "Well, this is quite the excitement for Cedar Creek. Corporate helicopters landing at our little airfield." "How is she, Doc?" Wesley asked, unwilling to be distracted from what mattered. "Clean break of the radius. We've set it temporarily, but she'll need a proper cast." Dr. Miller's expression was reassuring. "The head injury is minor, a few stitches and a mild concussion. We want to keep her overnight for observation, standard procedure." Relief flooded through Wesley. "But she'll be all right. Good as new in 6 to 8 weeks, yes," Dr. Miller confirmed. "Kids are remarkably resilient." As the doctor continued explaining Maisie's treatment plan, Wesley's phone buzzed with a text message. He checked it discreetly. "How is she? Is there anything you need?" "Specialist's second opinions. Just say the word." Wow, the concern behind the message touched something deep in Wesley's chest. He typed a quick reply. "She's okay. Clean break, mild concussion. Thank you for the helicopter and for caring." The response came almost immediately. "Of course I care. About both of you." 5 simple words that carried volumes of meaning. Wesley stared at the screen, a strange calm settling over him despite the day's chaos. In that moment, surrounded by the familiar walls of Cedar Creek Hospital, with Maisie safe beside him, clarity emerged from confusion. His life had changed irrevocably in the past month, not just because of the opportunity at Black Innovations, but because of what he had rediscovered about himself, his capacity for innovation, his desire to make a difference, his ability to open his heart again after years of protective isolation. And Vivian had been central to that transformation, not as a replacement for what he had lost, but as a catalyst for what he might become. As Dr. Miller finished his explanation and left them alone, Wesley turned his full attention back to Maisie. "How are you feeling, really?" It hurts," she admitted, "but not super bad. I was brave, Dad. I didn't even cry much." "That's my girl," Wesley said softly, pride swelling in his chest. Maisie's expression grew serious. "Did I mess up your important meeting with the emergency power thingy?" Wesley shook his head, amazed yet again by his daughter's capacity for concern beyond herself. "No, Maze. The meeting was over. And guess what? They loved our project. They're going to build it and help lots of people with it." "That's awesome." Maisie's face lit up despite her injuries. "Does that mean you'll keep working with Miss Vivian?" The question hung in the air, simple yet profound. Wesley considered his answer carefully, knowing that his decision would shape both their futures. "Would you be okay with that?" he asked. "If we maybe move to San Francisco New School, new friends, new home?" Maisie's brow furrowed in thought, the same expression Sarah had worn when considering important decisions. "Would we still have our memories of Mom, her pictures and stuff?" "Always," Wesley promised. "Those come with us wherever we go." She nodded, satisfied with this assurance. "Then I think it would be okay, as long as we're together." As simple as that. The wisdom of childhood cutting through complexities to the essential truth. What mattered was not where they lived, but that they faced the future together. Wesley smiled, a weight lifting from his shoulders. "Then I think we have some decisions to make, but not today. Today is just about you getting better." As Maisie settled back against her pillows, drowsy from medication, Wesley took out his phone once more. He hesitated briefly, then typed a message to Vivian. When Maisie's better, we'd like to talk about that job offer, both of us, together. Her reply came moments later. I'll be waiting. Take all the time you need. Some things are worth waiting for. Wesley smiled, tucking the phone away. Outside the hospital window, Cedar Creek continued its quiet, predictable rhythms, the life he had chosen after losing Sarah. A good life, a safe harbor, but not, he now realized, the only life possible. Sometimes the greatest acts of courage weren't dramatic rescues in blizzards, but the quiet decision to embrace uncertainty, to step beyond comfortable boundaries, to open one's heart to new possibilities. As Maisie drifted to sleep, her small hand trustingly in his, Wesley Grant made his choice. Not from fear or obligation, but from hope. The road ahead would have its challenges, but for the first time in 5 years, he looked forward to the journey. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, comment, and subscribe for more content that reminds us it's never too late for a fresh start.